yes, administration, where is the academic plan? What is the academic vision? And what are the material resources that are going to be invested to ensure that we serve all kids well in a new setting? If someone says to me, I bought in this community because we were zoned here, I get the pain, I get the family investment, but I am not an amenity resource. I'm not a property value upholder. And that might be harsh, but my fidelity is to the strength of the system, and it is not to property values, and that's just where I am. If you want to take a historic look at it, you got to go all the way back to the New Deal legislation and the starting of the FHA and redlining practices and blockbusting, and understand the history of segregation in our nation, which was grounded in assigning property values in a certain way in order to facilitate and separate folks and gain higher property values in some communities while diminishing the property values in other communities. There's a deep, rich, painful history associated with this, and I don't think anyone's trying to live into that painful history, but the elements still linger with us. I'm not a respecter of property values as a basis for how we assign boundaries. Every trustee has to make their own judgments, and what I know about my fellow trustees is they have clarity of vision, clarity of values, and I bet they would speak to theirs as well. So I'm committing to be a listener, but I'm committing to listening for equity and excellence. And where I hear things that aren't grounded in that, but are grounded in something that has to do with sort of individual family properties or something like that, we hopefully still part friends, but we'll part in terms of where I'm gonna fall on an issue. So I just offer that as an example. I'll also, so from that, all I'll do is offer just a couple of questions that I have, or things that I hope get raised up in this conversation. One for me, non-zoned schools, while potentially awesome, have a historic Achilles heel around continuity of equity, which is to say, when we set up a school for a specific balance, over time, what we absolutely know is that we lose that balance. Once something gets named as excellent and named as awesome and named as exciting, those with greater resources are able to flock to it, and with no ill intent, end up accidentally crowding out others for whom it's harder to get to. So if we go non-zoned, for me, we have to build a transportation equity fund or a transportation fund and say something like, if you are an English language learner, if you are on free and reduced lunch, or if you are in a neighborhood and now suddenly your school is non-zoned, you should be able to continue to have transportation so that all of a sudden you're not zoned out of the very school that you just went to last year. And you're like, yeah, actually I would like to go, but I'm 2.1 miles away and the bus is gone. So I would love to see continued guidelines, and at WIN they've been building these out, and other places we've built these out, where we say, here are the guidelines of what we want enrollment to look like. Here's what the balance looks like. Now, here are the guardrails to guard it, and here's the material investment to ensure that we can produce it down the line. So so transportation for non-zone schools would be very important to me. This boundary stuff is like blowing my mind. Again, there is a history around boundaries. There is a reason why our boundaries are such a mess in certain sections of the city. And it unfortunately has to do with folks kind of wielding a little influence and wielding a little power and saying, well, what about this street? And what about that street? And all of a sudden, little by little, it's like Congressman Doggett's congressional districts over the year. They just get so wonky and weird and don't make sense. So if we have natural and built environment lines as our sort of theory of action for boundaries, I would ask for consistency on that, and I would ask for like sort of a double check. Do the boundaries follow the natural and built environment? And by the way, if people want to question that as a theory of action, they should question it. I'm kind of okay with it at this point, but I'm also open to something else. But if that is our theory of action, I want to see consistency. And where there's not consistency, where it's all of a sudden this one little thing, this one little neighborhood doesn't follow the built environment like everything else does, tell me why. And sometimes you guys are pretty darn smart. You'll go, this is why, and I'll go, oh, okay, then I'm going to have to be a good communicator and communicate that I understand your why and I'm with you. But I might fall on the other side of the ledger too and go, I'm sorry, this continues to not make sense to me. And so I'm kind of a no. So I'm going to look for consistency in things like our boundaries, which, like I said, are sort of mind-blowing because it's a big thing you all are dealing with in terms of all these little nooks and crannies. I love Wynn. I love Campbell. And by the way, I'm also like hecka appreciative of like the spirit of Campbell families that called in. I kind of want to shout out my there's so many people I want to shout out for just their graciousness and the way they've come to this. I've got a letter from 167 Ridgetop families, or 100, I don't know, a whole bunch of, over 100 folks saying, wow, we're here at Ridgetop. We want to keep our school-wide dual language. We want to keep our leadership team, and we understand that to achieve the balance that we, by the way, don't have. Low eco-dis numbers, tiny. The 50-50 we're trying to achieve in terms of emerging in English language learners versus those for whom English is a primary language and they're learning Spanish, we're out of whack. And the Ridgetop families want the balance. They want the school-wide, and they want a solid leadership team and program. And when I said, well, what happens if you have to move? They were hurt, and they were sad, and they were tears. But at the end of the day, they said, this is Austin, and we can do this. And Pickle's a pretty cool, historic community in the heart of St. John's, and we can make that move. I'm like trying not to like choke up at just how beautiful my D3 families and communities and schools are. And I could go down the list of all these schools, how amazing they are. So there's an alignment, right? But then when I look at Montessori, this is probably going to get me in a lot of hot water with a lot of people. Montessori is multi-age in the same setting. Montessori is self-paced. Montessori is not grounded in benchmarks and testing and hitting this particular mark at this particular moment. It is attuned to the needs of the individual child. Dual language has historically had a lot of the same challenges where what we're doing with dual language doesn't map really nicely and tightly to a state accountability system. But when we get dual language right, it works out. When we get Montessori right, it works out. But gosh, it's a hard lift to do the triple bind of the Montessori principles, which are awesome principles, the dual language principles, which are awesome principles, and the reality of a punitive state accountability system that demands you hit this mark at this moment all the way up the line. I need the administration to help me see how we can actually do Montessori and dual language and Montessori and dual language in the state accountability system. I'm right now, I'm on the side of I don't think we can do it. And Montessori is something that once we're out of this multiple F's trap, it's something we could lean into. Or once we take Montessori and we say Montessori is a strand that is available to families in a space, in a school. But the school-wide Montessori, I'll just claim agnosticism at this point. I need to have it explained to me. And again, I'm not a Montessori expert. I know a little bit about education. I'm not a dual language expert. I know a little about education. So I think I can be educated, but I'll make up, at the end of the day, of course, I'll make up my own fill in the blank mind. I have questions about why single gender schools aren't part of the conversation. I'm gonna get in trouble on this one too. We have 3, which is an interesting number. And I'm wondering, for instance, about the under-enrollment at the single-gender middle schools and how that fits into our picture. Are we kind of like conveniently not talking about that one? Or is there a really good reason to not talk about it? Or is there an opportunity to say, Ann Richards has a $10 million foundation and endowment. Let's raise some money and get Gus Garcia a similar endowment, and then let's make a decision about Bertha Sadler Means. I'm not making a suggestion. I'm just kind of wondering out loud. I'm super excited to hear about transition plans. Super excited. When I think of, a caller said it, we got uniforms at Campbell, and Maplewood, that's a historic place with its own special vibe, and those are 2 wonderful, beautiful vibes. How are they brought together? And at Norman Sims, I remember when there was a march from one campus to the other with all the kids together to kind of build community, and that kind of journey of like getting it right through being really thoughtful. I need to see, and I'm hearing about, and I'm excited, and I just want to laud the investment in the transition piece. I think it's, super, super critical. My mouth is dry. And the last thing I'll say is that, like, enroll loss has got to be tight when we come into the next round. And we need to make it as easy as possible for folks to understand their options and get on board, especially where there's new configurations, especially where we have English language learners and folks who may or may not be conversant with the technology. So with those last 2, it's kind of like a glad to hear it and leaning in, and let's go on that. I heard a lot of people talk about kind of ill intent, and I don't see the ill intent. I'm actually grateful, and I was one of the 9 people that helped hire this guy, and I watched this guy build his team. This guy being the superintendent, excuse me. And I believe in the effort. I've seen a lot of closure efforts over the years. Typically, I've been over there on the podium, kind of on a different side of this. And this one has better documentation. It has more documentation. It has clarity in the why. And it has space for what absolutely needs to happen now, which is community weighing in and questioning and pushing and challenging. I can't really speak for everybody, even though I kind of think I know their beautiful hearts. I can speak for me and say, at this point, I see the bones. I see things that I think could be tweaked and built upon, and maybe even in some areas paths changed. But my North Star, as I listen to community, is going to be to keep listening to community, but make my independent assessment and be guarding equity and excellence everywhere along the way. I think you all have done amazing work. I know a lot of the community will part company with me on this, but I've been watching, I've been paying attention. I'm deeply grateful, and I'm ready for the next steps, even if it means I'm gonna have to put my reputation on the line because I believe in you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Trustee Hunter.
One was about academics, and I will submit that in the tracker as a general question, as it really doesn't pertain. Sorry, go ahead.
Academic vision, oh my God, how did I not lead with that? Oh my God, we need to be, this is an operation, Trustee Hunter's gonna punch me when we get off the dais. This is a beautiful operations document. And I absolutely need in each and every place, and overall, so much greater depth in articulation of what is already in the minds, but not yet on paper, which is the all-encompassing academic vision, and then especially in the places of change, clarity with specificity in the academic vision given the new particularities. And now I promise Trustee Hunter that I'll be quiet.
And I will just ask my question anyway, and you take it and y'all answer it later. It doesn't have to be answered now. But Dr. Maxwell, you mentioned that we have, when it comes to academics, we were trying to have sort of a centralized to make sure that all students are learning the same thing, especially in areas like D1 where there's a lot of mobility, and it's nothing like showing up to a new school and you're either 2 weeks behind, 2 weeks ahead, or you never heard this information. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I wanted you to introduce yourself because you're important, and a lot of people don't know who you are, even though you move, and you move a lot of people. Student services, when our campuses experience something traumatic, you marshal and mobilize and deploy people to surround those students with care. This is traumatic, and we understand that, so I'm glad that you're in the conversation. But Dr. Maxwell, you had mentioned, so my question is, and I'll post it, is what progress is being made to phase out campuses opting out of district-adopted HQIM, and how is that shifting the instructional impact? So that's that one. For our operations and Dr. French, I have the privilege of sitting, as part of my responsibility as a board member, sitting on the City of Austin Planning Commission, and I see our city. And I remember when I first sat here, I was like, lots of apartments, lots of kids. Not when you build studio and 1 bedrooms. And so though we see buildings coming up, it's really strange for people, because I know it was strange for me to understand, because I have kids and I'm a renter. More apartments does not mean more students. And unfortunately, in the areas that we are talking about, so my question is, what actions is the district taking in response to demographic data indicating continued student population decline to ensure resources remain aligned and we're not back here in 5 years, 7 years? And I know that you can't guarantee that, but what are we thinking about?
I can start and then pass it off to Dr. French. So during this work and the work with our demographer, of course, as we went through this hours and hours and hours every week, we not only looked at the boundaries and everything else, but our demographers worked with the city and the City of Austin and the permit office and the developers, and actually spoke to developers and visited sites. And our projections are 10 years out, so that is something that is pretty typical when you look at demographers' reports. But what we're really focusing on is the 5-year, right? We're looking, because that can be mostly honed in on during this process, because we know in 10 years things can change. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, you touched on all of it, and if anyone wants to dive deeper into the specific complexes that we have accounted for in our 24-25 demographic report, it lists specific residences and apartments that are in the ground being built. It also has a chart that's really helpful that, like, here's the ones that we're not including, because they're either, the sign might be up on the side of the road, but there's actually not a contract, and it could be 10 years out. And there's been ones that different community members have brought to our attention, and we've just double checked, and they weren't accounted for, but we were able to at least say we're predicting maybe 12 students or whatever it might be for that community. So happy to answer any of those specific questions too from the community. If there's specific units you want to know, it's in our report.
Any information like that we can provide to the public? Let's just throw it up on the site for like just miscellaneous or whatever. So people that really want to dig in, they have that there, and then they can account for it. And then finally, I want to center us again around language. So the term grandfather, I've already spoken to you guys about that. I am very interested in deep legacy for our families, so that if you have a kindergartner, you're not broken, right? You get to continue on. I've shared that also with the superintendent. So as we look at transition plans and as we look at Enroll Austin, and we talk about that legacy of allowing students to continue where they are, because I think some of the starkness for families is they think that next year their kid is in 9th grade or 10th grade, and then they're gonna have to go to a completely different school next year. And so that means we're not communicating well when people have those big feelings around that, because that's something that's not even true. They're like stressed out for something that's not real, right? So let's make sure that we have the proposed legacy plan for people to be able to see it, and maybe somebody will have like some ideas to help us shift. And then again, be sure that we're communicating that this is not, like, it's not a turn, right? There's some time for that legacy to peter out. Thank you.
Yes, Trustee Hunter, absolutely, and that is one clarification that we continue to hear about that we need to make stronger. If you're in kindergarten, you go all the way through fifth. I mean, that is a commitment we're making. I also want to talk about the grandfathering deep legacy. We are going to be changing the language on it. We just have to do communication around it because grandfathering is known and many people understand what it means. And so we didn't want to make a shift kind of mid-document. So we want to be responsive, but I also didn't want to create confusion by having two terms that meant the same thing out at the same time. But we are going to be doing that work to transition.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Trustee Singh.
Thank you so much for all the hard work. I want to echo a lot of what I heard from Trustee Foster. This is really an amazing job. I can't believe it. This is the second time I'm sitting on this dais and having to go through this. And 2019 was vastly different from what I'm seeing this time. You guys are doing what Dr. Hawley said, which was you're showing your work. And I truly appreciate that. And you're also looking at systemic changes. You can't just do consolidations without looking at boundaries and vertical alignments. And I salute all of you for taking this on. I do have a few things that have top of mind priorities that I would like to get addressed over the coming weeks. One is related to budget. That is, after all, a big reason we're doing all of this, and I appreciate the pie charts that you showed. I'm going to request even more information and more detail, and I know you're planning on that, but I really want to see transportation addressed. So any changes in transportation costs, whether they go up or down or stay the same, I would like to know that. Also, enrollment impacts, overall enrollment, like are we planning to increase enrollment, decrease enrollment? Are we thinking it's going to be leveled off? Also, the cost of all the transition work that we're doing, which is substantial, and I'm really happy to see all the work that's going into it, but we need to make sure that's funded well. And I know that the figure that you gave, the 25 million, so I noticed that the net savings went up from the 13 million that's in the document. Is that correct?
13 included the offsets for TAPS, which we're going to have to, and for all the investments we're going to have to make as part of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And so I wanted to be really clear, we're going to have to make that expense regardless. So
That's true.
So I just,
Okay.
I get worried when we begin to combine things when one is already going to be fixed. Like,
Okay,
because this is a
understood.
savings, we're going to have other expenses that are not even in here that we don't even know about that are going to introduce themselves.
Got it.
And so I wanted to keep them separate. Now, I
That's
think
fine, and I'm cool with that. Okay, so like the 25 million does not include the $800,000 per campus TAPS investment.
Correct.
Okay, so that's helpful, and that's fine. But there are things that are happening with this plan that are unique, which is like, the transportation costs, enrollment impacts, the transition costs, and investments in growing certain programs like the Montessori dual language. And you didn't really put a number next to the real estate monetization, but I think it would be helpful to see like different scenarios, like what it could look like, just so we can get a picture of like a really conservative budget forecast versus a less conservative budget forecast would be really helpful for me. I'm also not letting go of the HQ conversation. I think we just need to explain it and understand the rationale for whatever we might plan to do with HQ, because that is still continuing to be top of mind for me. For academics, thank you so much, Dr. Maxwell. I did ask for a lot more detail on there, and you provided it, so thank you. That helps me, and I hope it helps the public see that we are investing, we're creating this whole system around the individual classroom teacher and the child, and what a heavy lift that is. And all the progress that has been made. I think I really appreciate that slide that shows the wins that we've had so far. They are significant. We have more A schools than we've had, in the last few years. We have fewer F schools. We have increases in, like two of our high schools, LBJ and Northeast have gone up 2 letter grades in the last 2 years. I mean, it's really strong work. It's not happening fast enough because we don't have the money. And hopefully we will be able to get some out of this. So anyway, I wanted to make sure I address the academics, and looking forward to seeing more detail around that academic planning prior to the vote. Okay, so here's some now like more specific, I guess, tactical things that have come up from the community that I think are important for us to address. Is what changes in coursework and programming will occur at schools that will be receiving students from higher rated campuses? So I just want to make sure that there's evidence and a campus by campus review of proposed changes and offerings. And likewise, I want to see what changes in coursework and programming will occur at schools that will be receiving students from lower rated campuses. And those are TEAs, lower rating. It doesn't mean that they are worse campuses or the kids there are worse. This is just TEAs, arbitrary judgment based on one test on one day. But it is what it is, and those are the terms. And unfortunately, grade schools, we need to get rid of grade schools because it's horrible. It's doing terrible things to our communities, that website. But anyway, I think and we got to do something really fast too, because there are families who are scared and they're saying, I don't want to send my kid to, we're going to a B school, I don't want to send them to a D school, and I understand that, but they don't understand really what necessarily that means. Like, Wynn Montessori has a huge waiting list, and that's a school that's had 3 Fs in a row. There's still great value in our schools, and so I just want to make sure that we are really, like right now, reaching out to families who are possibly even making other plans. The other couple very specific things I wanted to raise up. There is a concern about Sanchez students being displaced from their neighborhood school and being rezoned to older campuses and campuses that are further away. And that doesn't quite, I understand the rationale, I really do. But I would like the staff to think about a way that we could, change that situation. I don't want anyone to feel displaced, especially if they are in a neighborhood that has historically been underserved. And I know you all don't want to do that either, but so one idea, could we make Sanchez an opt-in, wall-to-wall dual language like you're planning to, but prioritize enrollment of current Sanchez students instead of the Becker students, and continue providing transportation to current Sanchez students to Sanchez as well as their new zoned school? I don't know if TA will let us do that, but do you have any sense of that would be allowable?
So we have flexibility in how we support the transition. So I think that's something that we could work out. I want to be really clear that whatever we do at Sanchez, I want to make sure, because I think the question will then be, well, what about Pickle or what about Wooten, right? And so then I need to kind of think through the different elements associated with that. And also, Sanchez is a 3F. There's immense pressure from the state to produce a turnaround plan that will be accepted. That is primarily a function of the assignment of students. And so when you say workable, we have to put a plan together that we believe will be accepted. But I think that is something we can explore, the way that you described it. I wouldn't respond and say that I can do it. I just want to, I think there's enough there that we can.
I've just got to lift that up, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to that one. And then the other one, Go Valley, similarly, the feeling that students, in that neighborhood are feeling, families in that neighborhood are feeling displaced from their neighborhood school, even though they're allowed to continue there. But they are also being rezoned to older campuses that are further away. So question there is, so this is very specific, could we, and you don't have to answer right now, but could we merge Ortega, say, with Go Valley at Go Valley, and then perhaps consider closing Ortega, and then keep Go Valley as a neighborhood school? And you might wonder what happens to Wynn Montessori. I don't know. That's real. I just don't know. But right now I'm centering Go Valley because I was there last night, and these questions kind of came up in my mind. Another potential option would be, could we make Go Valley an opt-in Montessori school, but prioritize enrollment of current Go Valley students over the WIN students and continue providing transportation to current Go Valley students to Go Valley, as well as their new zoned school? And I didn't even know if that even makes any sense, but it's
Yeah,
just
that makes sense.
another.
That makes sense.
Okay.
The Ortega, that, because of Ortega's location in the district, far at the boundary, at the edge, I'd really need to work with the team to like think through that.
Okay.
I think I know, I just don't.
You get what I'm saying.
I know
But
what you're saying
anyway,
now.
I'm so sorry. We need to be super careful. With the way this is going right now, we are traumatizing other people. So I really need us to be, I don't have the word for what it is.
I know.
But is there
I know
gonna be
what
a
you're saying.
workshop? Is there some place we can like, this is their work. I don't know. No, I know we can't. I mean like out here like a workshop. I didn't mean like back there like a workshop, like in here like a workshop. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
providing those suggestions to the superintendent so that they can do the work and then bring that back to us, I think is a better way to do this. Because we've already mentioned 3 different schools that are not on this list of proposed consolidations or closures. And now, I mean, I think we need to be careful. That's what I'm saying.
Well, those are the only 2 that I had.
Okay.
So
But it's a long line of people.
I know,
So this is what
I know,
I'm saying.
I get that. And so I wasn't sure what if we were, if
Okay.
we
So,
were allowed
so I
to-
expect to take feedback, and then we will provide a response,
Okay.
and go through that. We will
Got it.
do the work.
However you want to, I am interested in hearing like what other trustees are hearing specifically from their community, because we don't have opportunities to do that.
Outside of
I really do want to hear specifics, and I don't know if I don't know if we're going to have another forum to do that. So, anyway, but I don't have any more schools that I'm naming, so, and apologies to anybody if anyone feels, if I've increased the stress, but I don't know how else to get this to folks. There was a concern about, are there sufficient numbers of emergent bilingual families to fill wall-to-wall DL programs if they are moved? And I don't know if that's something.
Yvette can answer that.
Thank you. So one of the things that we really looked at when we were going through scenarios was having enough seats, right, in Austin ISD within those 4 proposed campuses for non-emergent bilingual families. So we've seen the numbers, right? We've seen the document. And so at 3 campuses, again, hearing from the community early on, they preferred to maybe stay together as a community, not speaking for all of the families, but we really looked at that too. So for 3 of the campuses, that works. You've seen the numbers. For one of the campuses, it does go a little bit over that. But we are talking about kind of a priority structure. Would families be able to also look into another campus, right? For some families, I'm also seeing comments that it may be closer to their home, actually. So it kind of looks like that's going to work out right now. We'll continue to monitor that.
Thank you.
Plus, we also are including that immersion program, which is different and new. And so for some non-emergent bilingual families, that's an experience that they would want as well, right? So we wanted to make sure to have that option for them, to make sure that we have enough seats for our non-emergent bilingual families to
Okay, I
participate.
appreciate that, thank you. Another concern that I want to lift up that I've been hearing from the community is if there are any middle schools or if there are any elementary middle schools that are feeding into 3 or more middle or high schools. I know that is something that we had talked about earlier in cleaning up the feeder patterns, but, and you don't have to answer this right now, but I think that is something that, I know of at least one that does split more, but I just wanted to see if that could
Yeah.
be.
So, yes, we're going to continue to refine. When we had the work session, and I think it was on August 8th, when we had that work session, we talked about the fact that we have middle schools now that split to 5 high schools, 4 high schools, 3 high schools, and I think it was Trustee Foster who said, I want you to get down to 2. My goal, what I thought was possible, was no more than 3. We pushed and pushed and pushed and got almost all of them down to 2. We think we're still going to work on it. We recognize that there is one break at middle school where it goes to 3, and then we also have a challenge at one of the couple of elementaries. So we're going to continue to work on it and refine it, but the bar was high to get to 2.
Okay.
It was very, very high. And I think in
I
that
know.
conversation, I said 3 was what I felt comfortable. We attempted 2. We're very, very close. There's still work to be done.
Got it.
So we are going to look at that and try to get it
Cool.
to align a little bit better.
I appreciate that. And then could you also help me, and I did want to kind of lift up again what I heard I think it was Trustee Hunter talking about. When we are merging 2 communities together that are very different, I want to make sure that the campuses that are receiving, like, we really do honor the programs that they've developed there over time. And I just have to give a shout out to the media program at Campbell is really, really strong. So anyway, but can I just get a better sense of the process, since maybe I kind of messed up by naming too many schools by name, but like, what is the process for the trustees to be able to talk about specifics? Is there going to be another opportunity? And I know all of our meetings have to be public, but I am extremely interested in hearing what my colleagues are hearing, down to the specific school, because we're getting hundreds of emails, and I really want to, I'm relying on Trustee Boswell to inform me about D5 schools. I'm relying on Trustee Quintana to tell me about her. It's really hard for, to deliberate about this without naming specific schools. So how do we do that?
This is the forum. I hope you've seen us. We will come back as many times as we need to. We are constrained on time. We will take the feedback, we'll make adjustments, provide responses to our trustees. I'll have to work with the board officers to see what opportunities may exist as we move forward to go through that. We also have meet with each of y'all, and as I have in the past, to get feedback directly. But it sounds like what you want is maybe conversations with the whole. It's just, anytime you name a school, I'm gonna have to.
My objection is not to talking about schools. My objection is moving chess pieces, because they've done work, and that work is contingent on piece 1. And if you say, no, don't move piece 1, move piece 2, well, now they've got to go back and move all of that. So that's my objection to us suggesting, why not this, why not that? Because I've asked parents, and it's a really hard thing to do when they say, don't close my school. My question is, okay, then what school gets closed? And I have not, to a parent, not one of them has said a school. I get silence, because that is a hard decision to make. And as we begin to talk about it here, there is a reason, like, this wasn't arbitrary to pick these schools. There are reasons. They're not happy reasons, they're not feel-good reasons, but there was a reason. Suggesting another school, we need to go back and look and see if that's the reason, right? There's work that has been done. So that's what I'm saying. If that's a conversation we want to have, we're buying time, right? To have these, and we are having an opportunity, correct, Elaine, to come back?
We have to have opportunities.
We have to have opportunities to come back. And we're doing some
And we
things.
will manage our time so that we do that.
Yes.
I think that is one of the flaws in the system that we are forced to operate under, with the stringency with which we are supposed to operate under it, as we are trying to make decisions that free up the funds to serve our students well, to be thoughtful to our community, to build strong and sustainable schools. And we will do what we need to do within the system we must operate in for now to make sure we give it the time it needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, I wasn't, and I know it probably sounded like I was suggesting or requesting that we make the changes. I'm just lifting up things that I thought were worth answering.
Yeah, no, y'all are in the
I
community
apologize.
getting ideas,
Yeah.
and we need to hear them so we can
Yes.
improve and refine the plan. And so that's
Yeah.
how we're gonna
And if it's,
operate.
and if things that I lift up are a no, and you can explain why, that's it.
Yeah, I'm never gonna say no without the data and going through the analysis, so
Or like if there's a reason,
Yeah, if a trustee has a response, wants a response now, it's hard to give it like on the fly. I really need to think through all the different pieces, as Trustee Hunter said.
And Trustee Singh, to your question earlier, we will have a trustee feedback form. So if you want to channel those things through that way, we also have that as well.
Thank you. Trustee Quintana.
Yeah, I just want to comment on this conversation really quickly, because I understand both sides here. And, realizing that this is a very carefully constructed kind of Jenga-like tower, and like pulling any one piece just might, tear it all to the ground. But, when we're going to our schools and communities to ask them what their input is and what their feedback is, a lot of times they are having these very technical questions. A lot of our families have been here for generations. A lot of our teachers have taught here for 10 or 15 or 20 or 35 years. And so I would consider them to be experts. And that's why they are asking these very technical, detailed type of questions. But I also agree that we don't want to make anyone stress or have, any heart palpitations unnecessarily. But I mean, a lot of the questions that I have are from students and teachers and parents who are asking these, why not this, why not that? And so, I would just love clarification, I guess, on the form. But I also want my community to know too that like I'm prepared to ask these questions, but I do want to be respectful of the process and the forum in which to do that. So
Yeah, I think ask the questions and just know that some of the responses will require, us to actually look into how to respond appropriately. But if we can answer them now, we will. And then what we can do is produce a form that gets uploaded to board docs that's responsive to the questions that we hear off the dais. And then over the course of the next many weeks, continue to get feedback to our trustees, and I'll work with the officers to see if there's another opportunity that we need to come together. So I think you should feel comfortable asking the questions. It will help us refine the plan. We just may not have the ability to answer every one of them at this moment.
should I do that now, President Boswell?
Yeah, I think that makes
Or
sense.
do you wanna
if
keep going
that's
down
what
the
we
line?
know. Go. I think that makes sense. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let's start with Sanchez and the buses. I think that's been pretty much covered. I just really want to make sure that, we're getting our kids, like, we're not just saying that they can go, but we're actually making it possible. And do they have to apply and go through some sort of lottery process in order to stay at Sanchez?
Victoria, would you like to come kind of walk through that process so it's very clear?
Hi, everyone. Victoria O'Neill, Executive Director of Campus Family Engagement, and one of the teams that I support is the enrollment team. So the process hinges on all families engaging with re-registration in the spring semester. And so we are planning a full campaign of information and support to make that possible. And then for your specific question about Sanchez and the transition plan there for the students, the goal is for the program to be, 50-50 emergent bilinguals and non-emergent bilinguals. We are working really closely with Yvette and the MET team to develop the rubric that will be used for the campus-wide dual language programs. So I think while there are still refinements to be made, the answer is yes, that there will be an application process that we will support all of the families through. Round one will be the campus-based programs in the proposal, but there will be a rubric developed and publicized and shared with everybody that clearly lines out like how those decisions are going to be made.
And just to further clarify, we selected, as y'all have alluded to, these schools for a reason. Sanchez already has the highest dual language enrollment in that area of 3 schools that we were kind of talking through, and we would absolutely want those students to stay. And so while they might have to apply, all of our numbers are based on them staying, and we hear loud and clear that we also need to enable them to do so. But I just want to make it very clear that that was intentional in the selection of these 4 campuses, is making sure that the existing emergent bilingual students or existing students enrolled in dual language at those campuses have a seat.
Okay. I've also heard a lot of feedback around the construction on 35 that's happening just in front of Sanchez. I'm not sure if y'all have heard anything about that or have a response to that, but I just wanted to put that on your radar as far as noise pollution. I don't know, I just thought I would bring it up because I've been getting a lot of emails about that.
Yes, Trustee Quintana, we'll provide a comprehensive response. We saw this in 2019 when Sanchez was completed. We have, we're aware of the studies. We will provide a complete response, but the I-35 expansion was planned even prior to Sanchez being constructed, and went through the process and got assurances from a overall quality perspective that the school would be supported, for generations to come. We probably need to just kind of update that, reinforce it. But yeah, we are aware of the projects at 35 expansion.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, we have Travis Early College High School. I mean, there are other schools that are on I-35 for everybody that's, listening in. So we are very aware of kind of all the things that are happening.
Thank you. For Go Valley, I think I heard a lot of responses about they're nervous about a Montessori school being there that has not on paper performed well in their current place. And so I guess I would just like to kind of piggyback on what Trustee Foster was talking about, and just making sure, well, just asking, I guess, if we feel like, a Montessori school is conducive to a, A through F accountability state ranking system. Because there was a lot of concerns about that, and I think they're very valid. And that's not something that I have the answer to. Again, I don't need the answer right now, but our community would definitely love to know if what the answer is there. Additionally, there was a suggestion to put the Montessori at Pecan Springs. I know that they are right now on the same campus, right? Because Pecan Springs was getting renovated, or?
They're swinging on the same site as Wynn, but they are a separate entity and
Right.
operating as a separate school, but yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, I know I would just love to kind of pull one of those Jenga pieces out there and put that out there for y'all.
So, Trustee Quintana, regarding Pecan Springs, I think one of the things that we're going to have to be really thoughtful of is that's one that's also going to require a tap to the state agency. And unfortunately, there are going to be some requirements because they are a 3 UA. So I don't know how far that conversation got as far as, relocating Wynn Montessori to Pecan Springs, like long-term. We kind of shied away from that because of what the agency will
Okay.
likely want to expect.
Okay.
So I just want to make that clear. Like, that's why I didn't progress it.
That's helpful, thank you. And then I also want to just clarify for everyone that Magnolia is not one of our schools in the district, and so we can't merge because that's not us.
Correct. Magnolia Montessori is not an Austin ISD school.
Yep, thank you. And then for Wydane, I know that we are wanting to send some students to Rodriguez, and that is also an F-rated school, so I'm just wondering.
So this is where, 2 years ago they were a B, then they turned into it, and then they moved to a D. And that's whenever you tackle a large system like we have with the number of Fs, unfortunately, that we're having to navigate in response to the agency for the turnaround plans, there has to be, you're limited in the options that you have, right? There's reassignment, there's restart, there's charter, there's these things. And what we've heard time and time again is, keeping the students in Austin ISD. If we have to go through a reassignment, we have to be very thoughtful of the resources we're deploying at the receiving school. Given that Rodriguez has historically, has in the past been a higher performing school, we feel like that would be acceptable with the right supports at Rodriguez. And then Houston, it's the minority of the students as far as percent-wise, that being a modernized campus that'll deliver here within the year. coupled with the new leadership and the supports that that's been deployed at Houston, we feel like that would be an acceptable turnaround plan. But that is why I just want to be clear, like, it's not that they've had 3 Ds or they were a B just last year,
Okay.
the year before last, 2024.
And I just want to be cognizant of time. I know we have still other trustees who need to go. But lastly, with Martin, I know that you mentioned kind of having this like re-envisioning of what it could be. And so I would just like to know when those conversations would start.
Yeah, we would start them in the spring, and we would want to get to at least the initial part of the transitioning for the students at Martin to Keeling. And there's another move as well, but we'd want to have that fairly well developed, because it's going to be the same community that we're engaging with. And so we were also mindful of kind of how we're engaging them about transitioning the school while we're asking them to work with us to support the students in the movement. So I would expect kind of mid-spring, before Thanksgiving break, we'll probably have the first series of meetings. We would be on an expedited timeline. When you think about the cycle and when you would have to hire a principal if you were going to move forward with a new program, kind of when that would occur. So there's a lot of work that would have to occur in a relatively short period of time. So we'd want to get going in the spring semester.
Okay. I have other questions out there, more general, so I'll just put them in the tracker. And thank you.
What I can do is anything that's in a tracker that's tied to this meeting date, what I can do is bring them into a document and just upload them and kind of say, this is one of the things I was going to ask, and I'll respond as though it happened at this meeting.
Okay.
That would be excellent. Thank you. Trustee D'Urioste?
Well, thank you, everybody, to all the work. It's a lot. And I guess consideration of the time, I'm going to efficiently try and spread some heart palpitations across. The clock's rolled over, and we haven't talked about special education at all in this massive undertaking that we're doing. I don't think there's enough time to get into the depth of conversation on special education that the community would want and deserve, really, I think. Maybe the briefest way I would put it is the amount that we've talked about dual education or dual language education, which is certainly warranted. Almost everything that was said about that should be talked about for special education as well. Staffing ratios, the quality or the experience of teachers, how it's spread across the district, who's getting the most equitable service, transitions that those families are going to have to do. On top of that, for placement options, I mean, there's going to be an enormous amount of IEP meetings, ARDs, that are going to happen to address that. What is the plan for getting those through in the spring? I mean, that's a huge lift, and I know our special education department has already been, so occupied with the TEA order, and this is going to be a lot of work to get through in a way that is going to instill any confidence to those families. And so, I don't expect that to be addressed immediately, but I do expect it to be addressed in advance of what's going to happen. In the draft plan, it's very preliminary. We're going to do these things, but those families need to know how we're going to do that. And I think it's certainly an untenable ask for them to trust that that's going to come after the plan comes out. They need to know what's going to happen if they're going to support the plan. And I think that community in particular is one that's spread all across the district. So being that this plan is affecting the entire district, it's affecting that entire community. So I want to see that part. Kind of to the staff in general, again, like I really appreciate what we're doing here. My personal opinion is if this task that we're undertaking doesn't succeed, it's largely going to be a communication failure. Historically, communicating with the district is a problem. This is so complicated. There's so much going on. I know it's a huge ask on the admin. Everybody's working on it. Our messaging, I think, has improved some. It needs to improve more and rapidly because of how complex this is. We're getting engagement for the community. And to the community members that spoke out and, the documents we're getting, excellent job. You guys are not tasked to be communicating the type of stuff that you are. We are. The admin is. And it's a hard task, but I really believe that is going to be a make or break on this thing. And just to give an example, and this is the heart attack for the superintendent, is when they say, 1 year, not 1 month, there's a communication element there. What do we trade if we wait a year? Why are we doing it this fast? We have all talked about this. The admins talked about this. The fact that the community doesn't understand why this question is coming up for a November 20th vote is a failure on our part. And I'm just owning it. I'm not criticizing everybody. I'm saying that is an area that we haven't improved enough on fast enough. Because there are reasons why we're doing this fast. There's reasons why we're trying to do this now. And there's reasons why we're trying to do this much all at once. And the fact that the community doesn't understand it disempowers them to engage in the decision that we're making. They need to be able to have fair communication with us so that they can inform the trustees' votes. And my concern is that the community at large is not going to understand the magnitude of the vote that we're going to have. And I'm not trying to oversell the vote, but I mean, it's an important thing. We could vote no, we could delay, we could replan, but I don't believe that the community at large really has a firm grasp on why we're trying to do it November 20th. And so that's just to highlight the complexity. You had on some of these slides, the turnaround plan, but then as we discuss it, we're only talking about consolidation. And those things are completely intertwined in our discussion. And it's really complicated to navigate those two pieces. And there are more than those two pieces in this total package that we're talking about. Today was just the consolidation part. So, I'm just highlighting that issue for everyone because there's a lot of education that needs to go on through this process, and we are the educators. This is the school district. So I just want to highlight that part to acknowledge the work that's being done and highlight what we're trying to get done in a rapid amount of time. This process did start earlier. Maybe we have a little more than a month now, but it's not a 1 month process. We've been working at this for a while, and it is unfortunate that we're in a position where so many people don't understand how much work has already gone into this. But that is a responsibility that we all have, and so, I hope that we address that moving forward. And then, for the community part, maybe not a heart attack, but, I was really struck, someone said the metaphor of you don't trim healthy branches from the tree or you don't prune healthy branches from the tree. This isn't a tree. This is a farm. This is a garden. And things are not growing equitably across the geography that we're looking at. And the issue is that we have to have the entire farm producing, and we don't have enough water for the way we're doing it now. So we're having to transplant some things, we're having to make some changes, and at the end, we still have to water the garden every day. And that's a community effort. The admin is going to do the best. They're going to get watering cans in everybody's hands. It's not going to be just the school that succeeds because we're not in that type of situation. Double our budget and the school district will do it all for you. But that's not the situation we're in. And I get it. It's a lot to ask of the community. And I don't expect anybody to get on board without enough information. So I hope we get to that point before November 20th so we can have a vote that's fully informed.
Thank you. Okay, Trustee Kaufman.
Okay, thank you again for the plan. I am impressed by the technical nature of the plan and how detailed and all the different pieces fit together with the various components regarding both the boundary changes and the school consolidations and the TAPs and everything else. So it's an amazing technical document. It has a lot of brains in it, and I just really want to make sure, that we're communicating the heart that's in it so that we know that we're really addressing student needs through that. And I believe that we can do both. But I'm just going to zip through some questions that I'll put in writing after the meeting as well. So I want to know and be ensured that community input was sincerely considered in developing the plan. So I'd like to see some specific examples of changes from early drafts that changed based on the community feedback that you received previously. You mentioned a process for reading feedback and communicating with those people who provide it, but I would like to know the process to actually incorporate community feedback into the revisions of this proposal prior to a vote on November 20. Right? So not just communicating back that we heard you, but I want to know what's the process for actually making changes, because I heard there are some that seem like no-brainers in terms of sections of communities that were clipped in a way that may not support the overall mission. So I'd really like to know, that those things will be addressed. My first question about closures months ago was about cost savings, and I want to go back to that. I would like you to show us, based on evidence from other districts and our own cost structures, how the district's projected savings from closing 13 schools account for the full range of real costs, such as transition expenses, transportation costs, staffing reassignments, enrollment loss, so that we can be confident that the net fiscal benefit will actually materialize and not just shift costs elsewhere in the system. I would like to request more data on the projected cost savings. I know that the questions asked prior to the meeting by trustees were referred to, it's in the plan, but the plan is not very detailed in terms of where those cost savings come from. And so one specific question I have is where the projected reduction of 754 FTEs come from. If there are 754 FTEs cut across 13 campuses, that averages to 58 positions per campus. And the model that you showed us, I know it's just an example, but it showed 15 FTEs saved for one campus. So I'm really trying to make sense of if we're moving kids and we have teachers moving with them to account for increased enrollment at other schools, where do 754 FTEs come from? So that's the type of detail I'd like to see regarding the budget projected savings, or help me understand what I'm missing. I would like to know what the projections are of the number of students who will claim the grandfather or legacy options. What are the assumptions in terms of how many kids you're going to accept those? And I want to know whether those projections that you made differ based on the economic resources of families, especially given the transportation. How many families do you anticipate will actually stay in their school, and how many do you anticipate might want to stay in their school but not be able to because of transportation? I want to echo Trustees Foster and Singh's questions about transportation, specifically for legacy students and for students whose schools no longer have an enrollment zone. That was a very important line of questioning I had earlier. And just to note that school choice is not true choice for students who do not have the resources to provide their own transportation. I'd like to know what your projections are for the number of students that we might lose as a direct result of these changes. I know people will say if we only go to this district because of this school, sometimes, those, whatever, sometimes that materializes, sometimes it doesn't. But I assume that we will lose some families who choose to opt out to charter schools or to private schools or to a neighboring district. I would just like to know what our projections are for that and how that factors into the planning. I'm curious whether a reduction of more than 10% of our school campuses would allow for further reductions of district-level staffing, or do we feel like we've already picked all the berries off that tree? Or do you feel like if we have 10% fewer campuses, could we find more savings centrally since we have fewer campuses to support? I'd like to echo some of the questions about the academic vision and plan. Specifically, I'd like to echo Trustee Singh's comment about the families who are asking whether the school they would be zoned for would have the same course offerings. They could extend that to extracurriculars that the current school has. I think that question actually highlights one of the most important elements of this effort, which is when someone says, I don't want my child to go to that school because they don't have the same offerings that I have at this school. Exactly, right? That's the problem we're facing, is we have different resources and opportunities available for kids based on different schools. So I'd like a clearer public explanation of how this can lead us to having higher level and great opportunities at every school. So a family doesn't have to say, I don't want to go to that school because they don't have this. I'd like them to say, I'll happily go to that school because they'll have the same things I have here. But I know that there'll be a balance of that because some things will not be fundable at every single school. There will be some things that have to be different, but that's part of the baseline that I would like to see more clearly defined for our families, because that's a very real question about whether they'll have the same opportunities at another campus. Two more. In creating the school-wide dual language programs, we phased out the English-only track one grade at a time so that we wouldn't displace the neighborhood students kind of suddenly. As long as there was a critical mass in each of the remaining grade levels, I'm curious whether an option could be considered to phase out the zoned school at Sanchez and potentially at Odom and Pickle and Wooten also, rather than ripping that Band-Aid off in 1 year. So for example, could we place the school-wide program and still maintain an English-only track for the legacy students so that they wouldn't, the current students there wouldn't have to? That would also give the neighborhood students all the opportunity to attend the school, because any student in English or Spanish could enter into the school at pre-K or kindergarten through the application process. So I'd just like to know whether that's, I suspect that would increase costs, but I would be curious whether that could be considered a phase-in.
So just a clarification, would you want us to model that as an assignment within it, so that they retain an attendance boundary, or providing them that option? Because the attendance boundary is going to define the TAP. And so it sounds like an opt-in but maintain kind of two offerings.
I'm a school trustee. That's not, the operational details are not for me to give you any advice on, sir.
Well played, well played.
Okay. I just want to think about the options available for students to stay in their school rather than the fourth and fifth graders, rather than treating it as a closed local school where they are immediately bounced to another school. I don't know about all the boundary pieces. I just really want to think about the individuals. Okay. And finally, the section on special education on page 57 of the plan starts with students will still get the services listed in their IEPs. And then if your child needs to attend a different school for services, an ARD meeting will be held before the school year ends to make that decision. So the implicit message is that no significant changes will happen to our special education services. Your services that you're receiving now will continue as they are. I want us to be responsive to the community voices that are calling for clarity regarding the continuum of services offered at each campus. We're asking for more equity around what offerings are at each campus, and if we're calling for more consistent, high-quality programming for students in special education. So I would really like to know, as part of the academic vision, specifically what are some expectations that our families can have for improving the service that we provide for special education, not just continuing them. Again, thank you for all the work, and I will submit these in writing.
Thank you. Additional questions? Trustee Whitley-Chu.
And so my questions are financial and about TEA accountability. So if we have staff that, I don't have questions about, I don't have any questions about the facilities.
Lakeisha, do you want me to come up for? I would say Angel and Jennifer, just be on deck.
Okay.
Most likely Maxwell and Lakeisha.
All right, so my concern is that this plan is conflating the Austin ISD budget deficit with the risk of TEA takeover because of some schools' academic ratings. Okay, so with finances and saving $20 million, cutting that from the budget, we have lots of choices. With TEA accountability risks, we have fewer. So where does the November 20th or 21st deadline come from?
So the November 20th timeline is founded in the turnaround plans requirement to the agency, which is on the 21st of November. So, so that is the legal obligation to respond to the TAPs, to submit the TAPs on the 21st, that Friday.
But resolving our $19 million budget deficit is not, that plan is not due the same day.
So we have, for the beginning, talked about having a deadline of November, primarily to address the disruption that occurs in the fall, late fall, and then into the spring. So if we were going to look for reductions, the budget process is starting, it's underway. We, have to make decisions to create a recovery plan to address the 15% fund balance. And so if we're going to make changes that impact our operating costs, then we would want to take them in 26, 27. If not, then you would wait and take them in 27, 28. So it's really a function of a year.
Okay, so we have, how many schools that need immediate plans that were due on that day?
Turnaround plans? Between 2 UA and 3 UA is 22, 24.
Okay.
24.
And so this is the financial plan, and the two are merged together. So that's causing a lot of confusion in the community.
So we are tackling 4 or 5 things really all at once. I would say that there are opportunities in this plan that might not exist if you did only one or the other. An example that I would use is probably Wynn Montessori. The Wynn Montessori program, being that's a 3UA, the solution we have would not find its way in the same, it wouldn't be the same way because Go Valley would not be part of the solution. So the plan for the 3UA at Wynn would look very different. So the idea here was to kind of recognize that all these together created maybe different opportunities that we had otherwise if we looked at them in isolation. So yes, they're not required to be together, but we did it together because of how connected our entire system is.
So what other alternatives are there to cutting, what other ways are there to cut $19 million from the budget?
I mean, I can tell you the ones we haven't done. We haven't reduced our librarians. We haven't gotten rid of registered nurses, protected planning time. We've reduced central office staff. We've limited overtime. We've cut over $100 million in the last 2 years. There aren't lots of other options unless we're wanting to go back and maybe explore things that we otherwise said we wouldn't explore. One of the ones that was alluded to by Dr. Maxwell that we obviously haven't done is, we still acquire curriculum, $6 to $8 million. It adds up. There are different strategies we could deploy, but I don't think anybody would want to go down that path. So there's nothing that is like one thing, I guess is what I would say. It would be lots and lots of other things like what we did in this last spring semester, which didn't yield ultimately enough to get above our 20% fund balance.
So you mentioned a lot of things that people don't want, but so I would like to hear about central office, further central office cuts. So we have 132 six-figure salaries that add up with benefits to over $20 million. So that's about the same amount of savings. So not saying that those are the only cuts, but there's a, are there zero cuts that could be made to central office? It needs to all be school closures.
We took significant cuts in central office. We wanted to do that before we took this on. I think to Trustee Kaufman's comment earlier, as you move through and have a smaller system, you would see an impact, regarding the supports needed at central office. We're not at a point, we are operating, things are very difficult as it is. And we do have lots of vacancies. I know people can probably pull up our org chart and see that there are lots of positions we've decided not to hire. And the work is extreme at the moment, and it's creating issues with us delivering on all these plans and all the work. So I don't think there's an opportunity to revisit that until we understand what the new system is going to look like. But I think that moving forward, I'm going to always look for opportunities to reduce costs, period. I can't say for certain what that number is. I can tell you that all those salaries, I don't know, the system wouldn't be viable. I don't know how you would operate it with all those people gone in central office. That's just it's a larger conversation that I don't know how to respond to without really kind of expanding that question, just taking the salaries of executive directors and assistant superintendents and, they're needed to do the work too. I think at the end of the day, it's both. And that's just what it takes to run a system. But yeah, we can continue to refine, and we will.
And so talking about our TAP plans, like how many of our students whose schools are proposed to be closed or to be reassigned, how many of those schools will be moved, will all the students be moved to a campus that is academically acceptable?
You want to? She's talking about kind of Barrington.
Of the nine schools that have movements. So of those 9 schools, how many schools will 100% of the students go to a school that's academically acceptable under this plan?
No, they won't. We have really limited options as far as our turnaround plan strategies. So you can reassign them or you can restart them. So in order to restart them, you have to restart them with a leader that has successfully turned around a campus, and I'm using all terminology as part of TAPS and TEA language, so I want to preface with that. So to restart a campus, you have to restart it with a principal that has successfully turned around a campus, or they have served a similar population successfully. So you could have led a campus of, for our purposes, we're talking about students that attend Title I schools. So you could have led one of those schools and never let your accountability drop below acceptable. And again, or you could have restarted a campus in the past. You also have to staff that campus with a certain number of, again, TA language, highly qualified teachers. And in full transparency, we do not have enough staff that meet that criteria to restart every campus that is 3UA. So in some cases, we are going to have to consolidate a couple of campuses, again, if approved, so that we are able to maximize the staff that we have that are able to meet that criteria.
I'd say we have, so of the closure reassigned campuses, we have 8 campuses that are being moved to 19 different campuses. So those students are being, campuses are being chopped up into 19. And 14 of the campuses that they are moving to are also academically unacceptable. So my question is, how does this prevent, what the plan is being sold to everyone as something that will prevent TA takeover. So how will that prevent that?
So I don't believe that we're selling the plan. What we have put together is a plan that that creates the TA required turnaround plans to be thoughtful, to move students academically, but in a way that protects our values. And when I say that, what I want to say is, yes, an example that you're probably referring to is Guerrero Thompson and Wooldridge, where Guerrero Thompson is a academically acceptable school and Wooldridge doesn't have that same history. But from our perspective and from what I've heard from trustees in the past is when you accept 100% of a school and knowing that the students have additional needs and the student population is coming together, you could overwhelm and impact the school and not ultimately be able to move academics and be successful in executing the TAP. So lots of things kind of inform these splits. Some of it was, whether the schools are going to be in a modernized, students are going to be in a modernized facility, what the split was, how much space was at the receiving campus. So I believe strongly that these solutions would be accepted by the agency, but, and this is the big but, we have to develop thoughtful turnaround plans, and not just what TA needs. What they need is something very, is kind of distilled down. What we're producing is something very thoughtful. It's long-term. It considers transitions. It's lots of resource allocations that are actually in the backup. So it is a comprehensive plan. So we don't have enough high-performing schools to meet the, 100% and the space to a receiving school. We just don't have that ability in our current configuration, especially with the number of schools that we have to produce TAPs for. And I would say that TEA identifies acceptable as A or B. we know, just as an example with Rodriguez,
There's been a revision. They've added
A, B,
C
and
too.
C. Yeah, that was a recent revision as of like 3 weeks ago. It's pretty recent.
Statewide?
Huh?
Statewide?
Yeah, it's statewide. Yeah.
And this so this plan closes 6 of those that we don't have enough of, high-performing schools.
It closes the schools that are listed as part of the consolidation process.
And so I'm gonna give one of the pieces of feedback I gave to our consultant auditors when they proposed school closures. And they showed this will save money. And I asked, was that assuming that people are widgets and they move wherever you put them? And no one goes anywhere, no one leaves. We don't lose any enrollment.
Well, I think one of the things, Trustee Lee Chu, that I would say is AIC's enrollment's declining. It will continue to decline. Other urbans, other school districts in Central Texas, they are declining. And so when I get asked about assume a certain percent that will stay or go, there will be an impact. I want to acknowledge that there will be an impact, which is why we're desperately trying to put together thoughtful plans that welcome students and keep students in Austin ISD. And so students are not widgets by any means, but we can't operate the way that we're operating and continue to have the ability to support all of our students everywhere in Austin. It's just not possible. So something has to give. Either the state blesses us with a lot more money than we've ever gotten, which we know is not going to happen. We go back and look at things that were previously unacceptable to be challenged. But I want y'all to know that we are very thoughtful in the cuts that we take. So if it's going for central office again, or if it's looking at other resources or real estate revenue, whatever is available, we have explored it and we'll continue to explore it. Yeah, there will be an impact. And that's why these plans have to be very thoughtful to limit it.
And I do believe that's true. That's been very, very thoughtful. I think our community doesn't feel like it has been very collaborative. And our community has a lot of ideas. They have their values, and this feels really apart and separate from us, from parents of young kids. So, I heard many people on the dais talking about, well, this is better than in 2019. In 2019, some of us were nursing babies. We weren't a part of that process. And so this feels very much like this is being done to us. So the next year we were in a pandemic, very isolated, and now we are in elementary school where we have communities, we have support, we have friends, we have other families that mean everything to us. And we're in the busiest time of our lives. So we're working full-time jobs, we're taking care of small kids. Some of us have older parents that we're taking care of too. So a lot of folks aren't watching all the board meetings, and then all of a sudden they hear that this wonderful place that means the world to them is closing and it's over. So this is a big hit. And so seeing like these numbers where like we're talking about our buildings and utilization, like none of us, that's not our priority at all. And then having, staff coming in and saying, well, we're not gonna listen to you. Even if you come out and you yell and scream, like we don't really care. Like we're being told that. And we don't, most of us, like, I've been around, I taught in this district for a long time, so, I've been around and followed it a little bit, but, people don't feel respected or that they're getting empathy and that they're just getting jerked around, and it doesn't feel good to be told, well, November 20th, like when will we get the new draft that we're gonna vote on plan to vote on for the 20th.
So, so the plan right now is to we're taking feedback. We are looking at all of it. To Trustee Kaufman's comment, there's conflicting feedback too. So, you know, we can't incorporate every aspect because there are times when there are things that we hear and receive that are opposite of one another. I want to be really, really clear. That's what happens. We're taking that feedback. We're making refinements. We're adjusting. The 20th that date was set months and months and months ago. We're going to be annotating the report so that anytime, you know, a community member wants to see like, hey, this is the part of the section that impacts my community or my family, they can see how the feedback that we received changed, did not change, refined, improved, took away, whatever. And it's really, really clear. So we're going to be linking that throughout the entire process. As far as the draft deliverable, you know, it's going to be progressing, so the community should be able to see this is something that the administration supports or should change or is recommending changing. We haven't thought about an interim deliverable prior to the deliverable that gets uploaded for information session. The information session then provides the time between that and the voting session. But we will have kind of the annotations and changes and feedback tracked along the way. And so I can talk to the team about kind of what we can share and at what point along the way that says, okay, this is what we heard from the trustees in the first 2 weeks of cards. This is what we feel like we can support and consider. These are things that we can at this time. So that's one of the pieces in between that we need to kind of provide some detail on, because the next formal draft we were anticipating being the week of the information session, the week prior, the 5 days prior to or I guess a week and a day prior to what was the date? November 6th. And so, yeah, so that's the current draft.
See, that's just a very, very short timeline. I would like to urge the administration to focus on the real deadline, that is TAPS. Schools that need I call them punishment plans that TEA imposes on us. Engage with communities that have those requirements, because we have shown the administration does not have the ability to meaningfully engage and communicate with everyone affected by this. So focus there. With financial, we have time to collaborate with people. Conflating this together makes this a process where an up or down vote is putting the district at great risk. And that feels heavy-handed to me.
Thank you. Trustee Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you. I have heard a lot about the long-term financial impact of families leaving the district. And I think that is a real consideration. I would be interested to see how the district is forecasting for what they project that number to be. And I will also say that what we're going through right now is the long-term financial impact of families leaving this district. My family went through the East Side Vertical Team. They went to Zavala, they went to Metz, they went to Martin, they went to Johnston, and they went to Allen Junior High. 4 out of those 3 campuses don't operate in this district anymore because past iterations of this body chose to invest otherwise outside of those communities. And there are still 15,000, 20,000 students that live in Austin that do not choose to go to Austin ISD. And that leaves $100 million on the table that we otherwise could be operating with. But we chose to invest in other things and not in that vertical team and not in those communities. And so I hear the concerns and the threat of that, but we're already living those. And I cannot just sit on my hands and wait for that to get worse. In relation to the plan and that comment, Martin Middle School and Bedichek Middle School seem to be question marks as I read them in the plan as to what's going to happen with the future of those campuses. I will say that given my personal connection to both of those communities, my families that I'm related to that attended and attend those schools, and the people that I represent that go to those places, I am unwilling to accept that the future of those campuses being a question mark, because there's no other way for me to read that other than a permanent disinvestment from that community, from the Martin vertical team. Bedichek also, I will say, from talking with those communities, since we're talking about what we've heard, there is a profound sense of unfairness. That campus was a B-rated school right before START 2.0 and before they received communities from a neighboring middle school. And it feels so unfair that after successfully operating with many alumni from that community, including myself, that they would just be summarily closed after 3 years. I am also concerned, and have heard concerns from the Bedichek community, that they are slated to be split between 4 different campuses, literally to the 4 different directions, to Lively, to Mendez, to Covington, and to Paredes. I don't know what the answer is for that, but that's a concern that I've heard. I have another long list of small boundary adjustments that have been brought to me that I would like to discuss, but I don't feel that getting into the minutia in that way is helpful here. The second to last thing that I'll bring up is Trustee De Urioste and Trustee Foster both talked about middle school and uneasiness around middle school and around special education. And we had a conversation about dual language. I don't see anything addressing in this plan, and maybe it's outside of it, the students that are at the intersection of those two populations, special education and bilingual. The state just approved EPPs to offer a certification beginning in 2027 or 2028. I think it would be smart for us to preempt that requirement coming and for it to be built into this plan in some way. Because that, as we have heard from the audit committee, the way that our dual language and services provided to emergent bilingual students are just, they're not functioning. We're continually failing to meet the needs of those students. The last, yeah, never mind. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions?
Just a point of clarification about central office and cuts at central office, because that was also a very pointed comment or two that was made. And my understanding is that what we've cut so far from central office is 20 million, and that we've cut from outside contracting is an additional 14 million, and many of the outside contracted services are now provided in-house. And so, you know, one of the wonderful things about this diocese is that there's kind of a diversity of perspectives, very heartfelt, but I want to make sure that we get some clarity on just some pieces of the puzzle, because I have an alternative concern, which I've voiced from the diocese in past meetings, which is that as we cut central office, and we had 83,000 students, 20 years ago, we dropped to 72. So we had expanded central office, and now we absolutely kind of had to make the cuts to central office. But the cuts were substantial. And I have concerns about the capacity of central office to serve the local campuses and to have our executive directors on campuses doing the work they need to do, as we've cut positions, purposefully not filled vacancies, and then also taken on additional work because of the outside contracting not done. So I guess I'd like some clarity. That's kind of my read on the situation, but I might be slightly inaccurate or wildly inaccurate. So what have we done with central office? Has there been cuts?
So, so when I said $10 million, that was just this last July cut. That was the June 26th to August 1st. But you are right. There were previous reorganizations that occurred in the 25 and 24 fiscal year. I'm not sure if it's quite $20 million, but I can get the number. So that last 10 million was a concerted effort to kind of restructure and do a almost kind of a blank slate built from the ground up based on the number of students who were serving at that time. Every effort prior to that was making adjustments around the edges, right? But those did add up to staff. So I don't know if it was quite $20 million, but it was certainly more than 10. I would maybe guess $16, $17 million in that range. We did bring in-house other staff. You know, there are lots of divisions that did grow, special education being one of them, where previously we didn't have staff and we had to make adjustments not only to address the issues that we had and the work around the TA agreed order, but just, you know, the fact that we didn't have the staff in place to meet our student needs. So there's been a combination of those things, Trustee Foster. You know, I want you to know, like, we are very thoughtful. Anytime we approve a position, we freeze positions. You've seen me do that now twice. Every position that we release, executive director or above, comes to me for approval. We're very, very thoughtful. We do not want to waste resources. But these people here, as well as many in the building, like, they're here to support the schools, and they do support the schools. Many people are at the schools all the time. And so, yeah, it's a combination of those things, Trustee Foster.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hunter.
I apologize for expending more time, and I've already expressed my frustration, but Mr. Superintendent, when I stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning sending questions in, I expect them to show up in the backup. And I read my backup. I did not look again until just now and saw that my questions were not in the backup. I represent the largest district in this city, 28 schools. They need to know that I am thinking about them, and not just for performance sake. They need to know that I am thinking and considering and bringing back the feedback. I had a meeting last Tuesday. Those questions were based on that meeting. So now I'm gonna read them into the record and move our clock up. But they're in the backup. If the administration doesn't have an answer, my expectation is that the question is placed in there and the administration says, we don't have an answer. But the question needs to be in there. The first question is, was about the, what Dr. Kaufman asked about. And I didn't see it. And if it's in there and it's just somewhere I can't find it, please let me know. I apologize. But it was 6.1, and it was, it says, please provide the board with an estimated cost savings summary expected from school closures, direct operational savings, staffing, reduction in campus-based administrative positions, principals, APs, office staff, consolidation of instructional staff if enrollment is absorbed at other campuses, facilities, utilities, electricity, water, HVAC, custodial, maintenance and repairs, deferred maintenance avoidance, transportation, potential increase or decrease depending on new student assignment, but may stabilize long-term. 2, one-time cost offsets the savings, relocation of students and staff, moving expenses, furniture, technology, and classroom materials. People want to know the answer to that. And we need to have an answer for them. The second was about, it says, our community has asked for clarity on what every student at every campus can expect academically, the non-negotiable basics that will be in place across all schools while still allowing campuses flexibility to meet the unique needs of their students. Please provide an update on these plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee DeRuiter.
And I apologize, just one clarifying question, and I do mean this kind of genuinely. I'm trying to spread out, I guess, the areas we're addressing, but to really put it bluntly for the public, Mr. Superintendent, why do you think this is the right plan to propose? I know we're still going to modify things, we're going to adjust and stuff. You know, you're coming to us with this plan. Like, why do you think this is the way to go?
So, I believe that Austin ISD for generations has never developed a comprehensive plan and actually executed it to inform generational change. I look at the, amalgamation and boundary changes over the 144 years, and I can't even tell you how some of them came to be. I go back to early 70s and see how the high schools, how we had students north of MLK going to Crockett, and then, different, areas that just kind of stayed, and then new schools got cut in. And so I think about the fact that we have a genuine opportunity to align feeder patterns. So that's one thing. So to me, a plan that incorporates that is going to be a game changer when you think about 20 years from now. Like, why do certain schools in West Austin have that alignment and certain schools in East Austin don't. We would never, ever take that on, ever, unless it was something part of a larger effort. We know how painful these boundary changes are, and I don't think that we would ever take that on. That's my honest opinion. I think, too, the TAPs are very harmful as far as implementation, given the scale that we have to do. We have to implement 24 of them in a school district with 116 schools. And so that is a huge lift. We're limited in the options that we have, and what I've heard from our community is we want to maintain we don't want charter partners. If we can avoid it, we would like to do that. Two, we want to retain geographically a footprint wherever we can. As we heard that in Dobie, Burnett, and Webb. It's why we made the adjustments that we did at the time. And if we don't incorporate the TAP work in this larger effort, then opportunities will be lost. So we did notate the TAPs here, but I mean, the win solution for the TAP would not exist in the same way. Sanchez would look different, and many others would look different as well. So I want to be really clear, that is an opportunity that I think we have because we're doing it all together. I think three, program stability. We did spend a lot of time talking about wall-to-wall programs because they've been around. We know that they're great programs. We also know that what we've seen in the last several years is a decline in the number of students who the program was meant to serve initially. Well, what does it look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Are we going to support a wall-to-wall dual language program if it's 8% emergent bilingual students or 5%? Where does that line end up being? And so for us, one of the things that I think this plan affords us the opportunity to stabilize the programs in a place that gives access to students who the program was originally intended for. Now, we have to work through the details and make sure that access is protected, but that's one of the things that that if we did it in isolation, we wouldn't have a home program to go to, because we're doing it all together. That now can be considered. I think the other thing I would say is, when you think about overall reductions in cost, consolidations, just to be blunt about what we're talking about. I have gone through this process in 2019. I've looked at other processes around the state, and what I've heard loud and clear is do not overburden one community over another. East Austin, North Austin, West Austin, you just don't do that. And I agree with that. I agree with that, especially when it impacts historically underserved students to adversely to a greater extent. So if we didn't have these programmatic moves and we weren't addressing the TAPs in this way, you would see, if the $30 million mark was the goal, more consolidations in the Eastern Crescent. Because the programmatic moves occurred in the way that they do, they don't occur in that way. And I would say lastly, transfer policies is something that we've been talking about doing for quite some time. Right now, most of them are managed locally, and that's created some imbalances within our system. And we are breaking some that have been in place for a very long time, but I don't know that you can introduce that without kind of having the reset as a whole, which is something that I've heard over the last 3 years with this board and with, in the LRP and other. So to me, it's really the multi-layering that created new opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise found if they weren't done all together. I think if you did consolidations, it would look different. If you did TAPs alone, it would look different. If you did program moves, it would look different. So that's why all those have to get done, which is why a plan that considers all of them is one that I think works best. I'm not saying this is the final version. I think it's draft. There's lots of refinement to it. But that's why I would say that this approach is the approach. I also want to, regarding timeline, I have been here when changes are made to campuses in the spring semester. When 6th grade got ripped out of Mendez and Martin, that occurred in April. We did not recover as a school system. We were scrambling to move instruments. We were scrambling to move staff. The schools barely recovered by winter of the next year. And I would argue some of them never recovered. That happened in the spring semester. Our families didn't have time to plan. We did not have time to actually support our staff. Same thing is true when International got ripped out of East Side College High School. right? They had planned to build that school with Eastside Early College High School, and then they moved to Northeast Early College High School at the same time, spring 2022. And so I'm really wanting to, if we're going to make a change, it needs to be done with enough time for our families and staff to plan, for us to put the systems in place to support them, which is why if we don't hit November, that is the board's direction, but the disruption that'll be caused in the spring semester means that you're gonna wait essentially a whole year, right? And that means that some of the things that we're trying to address would just be 1 year delayed, which means the budget constraints would be exacerbated by 1 year. So that is really what I'm wanting to avoid. And I think that also kind of ties into just our enrollment system. You know, all these changes are going to have modifications to our enrollment system. As one of the trustees over here said, it has to be tight. You know, that enrollment process starts in November. So we're already going to be up against the timeline, right? When application-based programs start in January and February, I mean, that is already going for next year. So it is it's a complex system. The document deliverable is very complex and layered because it is just a unique system. So that's what I would say. I don't know if that was helpful, but.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a few questions, and I'll try to make them quick, and I don't need answers to all of them here, but I want to share them, and I will also send some in writing. I would love for each of our campuses that has had any kind of academically unacceptable rating in its proposed form, I would love for our data department to look at statewide data. For other districts, look at emergent bilingual status, economic disadvantage status, mobility, the percentage of special education students. We know that where there are charters nearby that have 16,000 students zoned, that are educating 16,000 students zoned to Austin ISD, we have a much higher percentage of students who need special education services because they are disproportionately generally not at the charter. I would love to look at all of our data and look at how many campuses statewide with similar demographic populations are successful under this A through F accountability system. Are we building schools that statistically, when we look across our state, have a reasonable likelihood of being successful? We are playing a very high stakes game, and I think that's just a basic understanding we need to have about the populations that we're pulling together as we also think about this. Second is, when we're talking about academics, I appreciate the slide that shows our systems are responding, all of this. That slide was really completely about A through F accountability system, STAR, and things related to that on our scorecard. And I want to be sure when our families are worried about going to a lower rated school, they're not worried about that letter grade. They're worried about all the other things that we're not doing for students at that campus because we are so focused on that letter grade. They are worried about opportunities people have to be collaborative, learn critical thinking, things we know great things are happening in every single one of our schools, and we know we are not offering a fair spectrum, an equitable spectrum. And when we talk about academics, I hope we will lean into the great things we do. We do so much more than teach kids to read and do math and earn a rating for their campus. We want to teach our kids to be thinkers and dreamers and doers. We want them to be curious and exciting. Our schools are doing that. We need to talk about that. And we need to lean into, with our academic plan, what will that look like where we're not doing that yet? I just want to echo that. And when I look at the timeline that has been put into the very large document, and thank you for, this is very thoroughly documented in many ways, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into trying, and working to get as much information as possible out to our community. But when we look at the timeline for that, and planning will happen in summer, that means there won't be that rich academic opportunity at that campus in the fall. That means that we're inviting people to go to a campus to transfer from a higher rated campus to a lower rated campus, where we're telling them we'll get around to that later. And that's a big ask for families, and it's really not fair to our students who are already in schools that are not yet getting what they need. With the financial savings, I echo my colleagues' questions about we need more detail about what this is, where the savings come from. campus by campus, including the transition plans, the transportation, the expanded special education services to make those transitions not only legal but meaningful. We need to look at it really thoroughly. We also need to understand both realistically, what can we learn from enrollment loss at other communities that have gone through a big disruptive closure process. We know that there is enrollment loss to charters up and down the economic spectrum. There's enrollment loss to charters, to privates, to people who move. We need to have a realistic understanding, and that is why we need to do this as thoughtfully and well as we possibly can, because every encounter, every engagement, every time we change a boundary, that we zone someone somewhere else, we're giving them an off-ramp. And we need to be sure that we're inviting them to stay on. And we also need to be leaning into recruitment. And I know we don't have money, but we don't have enough money not to be recruiting. The charters are. We don't have enough money not to be inviting families back while we are doing a process that is really intended to give them a good reason to come back. Now is the time for that. Now is the moment for that. I also want to just speak to the importance, as we're working to build equity into our system and to better serve students we aren't, to continue serving the students we are. We are a rare thing that we are an urban district that continues to serve our full economic spectrum. That is not just about students, that's about our whole city. And being a city where people choose public schools shapes us deeply and is well worth fighting for. And I don't think that means, bending to privilege or any of the worries, but just making sure that we're taking care of what's working while we fix what's not, taking care of who it's working for while we fix what's not, and making sure that we're learning from what's working and adapting it to every community in our city. And, people are about to have more choices with vouchers. People are about to have a lot. And again, that comes down to listening, collaborating, and being as thoughtful as we can about the changes we are making, which are very, very hard. Looking at, and I know, we have the most recent data I have, that this year's numbers are probably different. We take all of our funding, it's about $13,800 per student. We lose 72 students, we lose $1 million. We lose just under 1,000 students, we eat up all that $13 million. And I think that's really important to understand, that we have to hang on to everyone we can, and we need to invite new people in. I don't think that means we don't have to go through closures. I don't think that means we don't have to go through this really painful process. I just mean we need to be aware and thoughtful and deliberate and relational and human about it. With that, I just want to talk generally. Transfers, I expect that we will have a final transfer policy from our committee in collaboration with our administration. I hope with input from our community to vote on when we vote on the closures and the consolidations. I hope that all happens on the same meeting. I think it's a big ask to not have that when we're saying, and we don't really know what your policy is going to be. I think we need the same about transportation if we're talking about our legacy schools that are proposed to become unzoned. Some of the things that our community is telling us are disruptive. I would like to have a transportation policy updated at the same time to consider what we're proposing. Transfers into schools that are closing. I am hearing a lot of pain from the Briker Woods community specifically, which is a very high transfer community, that if they close and transfers cannot go with them, that is shattering their community, kind of twice over, and in a really deep way for the kids who get scattered. And I want to be really thoughtful about thinking about what we can do about that and being really aware about that. Siblings, I think the same. I think anyone who says a sibling won't be able to attend a school that an older sibling is at has never had two kids going in two different directions. That is, we will lose families. We will absolutely lose families. My brother lives in a city where it's all lottery. Your children don't have a guarantee to go to the same school. He lived next door to a public school. He chose private. because he couldn't get that promise and it wasn't going to work with work and travel and all of that. And I want to be really, really thoughtful about that too. I think when we talked about minimizing disruption, those were some of the kinds of things I had in mind when I talked about minimized disruption. And I also want to talk about, I am hearing in my district and from some other people, a lot of things about moving one group of students out to make room to move another group of students in, when it could be done with a whole lot less disruption. The utilization might be a little less elegant and a little less close, but it would be so much better for people. And I really want to be sure we're listening to our community. I know you have already reacted to some of that and listened to that, but I'm hearing that over and over and over and over. And if we don't have to disrupt people and our 85% is more like an 81, I would so much rather have some orange on the map and a process on paper that is a little less perfect, but is much better for our people. I think that is immensely, immensely important. I also want to lean into talking about recruitment, talking about dual language recruitment. The people who built the programs at Becker, at Ridgetop, at our other dual language programs 20 plus years ago, families from those communities who believed in dual language, who fought for dual language in the city, went and recruited families, Spanish-speaking families, to bring their kids to those schools. They knocked on doors. It was an immense amount of work. I would like to have that baked into the funding. If we're moving into the neighborhoods, how are we going to invite those families? What does that look like? That has a cost. It also needs to be a plan. I do have a school in my district that is splitting to 3 high schools. That seems unjust. If that was what we were trying to get away from, I'd like to have that conversation. And I have some campus-specific questions that I will put in the tracker in the interest of time, because I know we have blown way past what we allotted, and I know there can be a consequence to us for that, and I want to move on with the rest of the meeting, so thank you for all of that. Anything else before we move on? Okay, thank you all very much. Let me unbury my script, and thank you for all of that. Okay, we will now move on to 6.1, student achievement, our scorecard goal 2, third grade numeracy. Thank you. Oh, and before we begin our presentation, we need to confirm that our monitoring report is complete. The following questions help us determine if the monitoring report is effective or not. Does it clearly show the specific goal being monitored? Does it and the interim goal? Does it show data for the 3 previous reporting periods, preferably on a line graph? Does the monitoring report clearly show the current reporting period? Does the report clearly show the target reporting periods, annual and deadline targets? Does it clearly show the superintendent's current view of system performance relative to the goal? Does the monitoring report clearly show supporting documentation for the superintendent's understanding of performance? And if the system is not at meeting the target and the superintendent's understanding indicates implementation is not on track, does the report clearly describe systemic root causes, strategic responses, and any needed next steps? Does anyone have evidence that the elements of an effective report are not present before we move on? All right, thank you very much. And thank you all for being with us.
Thank you, President Boswell.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell, for being back.
The team and I will present on the board monitoring report. I have joining me Jennifer Pace, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Schools, Dr. Marianne Maxwell, Assistant Superintendent of Academics, and Jennifer Jones, Director of Elementary STEM. So this is Goal 2, third grade numeracy. The goal states the percent of third grade students earning meets grade level or above on the STAR mathematics assessment in English or Spanish will increase from 39% in June 2024 to 55% by June of 2029. The goal progress measure that was selected by the trustees states the percent of second grade students scoring in the recommended for intervention level on the NWEA MAP mathematics achievement score proficiency indicator, which is below 30th percentile in English and Spanish, will decrease from 37% in June 2024 to 29% by June 2029. This does align with our district initiative, Foundation First, and the evaluation of progress determined by me states that there's evidence that the district is on track to meet the third grade numeracy goal. 42% of third grade students earned meets grade level or above on the STAR Mathematics Assessment, an increase from 39% in 2023-24. Data meets the current year targets and suggests the district inputs and work around improving numeracy is positively impacting student outcomes. Next steps include continuing to focus on high-quality materials and instruction, increasing professional learning for staff, and expanding coaching opportunities around observation and feedback. We do expect to see continued growth in math outcomes. And one of the things I think is worth pointing out is this summative data does correlate to the goal progress measure that we use throughout the year. It's one of the things that we're always checking for. Did the goal progress measure that was selected actually indicate that we were going to be on track or exceed? And in this case, they were correlated. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Maxwell to take us through the remainder of the report.
Thank you, Superintendent Seguda. I'm excited to bring this tonight with my colleagues and talk about some of the math work that has been done and some of the early outcomes that we're seeing. And let's talk about math for a while. We're going to let Ms. Jones loose so she can talk all she wants about math and add some minutes. And we'll give some examples from campuses and talk through some things that we've seen. So we're excited here that the district really has improved the number of students scoring at the meets grade level or above on the STAR Math Assessment, and in fact exceeding our target for 24-25. We really do feel that this is early evidence, as we've seen really in a few different areas that some of the strategies that we're using are starting to work, that really leaning into our numeracy framework and starting to build the systems around that would create that kind of success for our kids. We're beginning to see the fruits of that labor really district-wide. And so as Mr. Seguda mentioned, these are some of the next steps of the targeted professional learning for teachers and instructional leaders on math. You know how much we did this for literacy last year. We're very excited that we've already started this with math this year with teachers and with instructional leaders, and really maintain that focus on district-wide implementation of high-quality instructional math materials. I know we talk about instructional materials a lot, and it kind of sounds like, well, let's just hand everybody the materials and math will happen magically. And there's so much more that goes into it than that. Professional learning is really a key piece of that, and being in classrooms and seeing what's happening and knowing how we can pivot so that we can support our campuses with the implementation. But the instructional materials themselves matter very much. We've talked a little bit before about math not being as quite the same at the same comfort level for many of us, including all of our teaching and instructional leadership staff. And the materials are a huge help with that when you know they're high quality materials. I'm going to give some really specific examples of this. You all and we all learned math kind of usually likely a very different way than the way most of our students are learning math right now. We learned a lot of procedural math. So we put numbers together and we had steps for those numbers, and there were steps that you followed and there was a right answer at the end of it. And that's how we learned math, and we memorized that process, those procedures for math. And we kind of think of it a lot that way. And when we're talking about rigor in the math classroom now, we're talking about, yes, procedural matters, and really fluent procedural math is important. But we're also asking our students to learn conceptual math, which is much more difficult. It's not, and it's higher level thinking. It is that critical thinking in math. It is flexible thinking in math. And it's learning how to make representations of numbers in different ways, not just the written number itself. And so you learn how to actually complete math and do math and understand all of the concepts behind it. And then we're also asking for application of the math as well. That's where you see a lot of the real world examples where kids can make connections to not just completing the algorithm, but applying that in a real world situation that actually means something, and it makes sense to them, and they can begin to see how math really applies to the real world. The reason I'm talking about these things together with instructional materials is that there are a lot more math materials out there that do not have these three things that would make it rigorous math instruction. More so, in my opinion, and probably your opinion as well, Ms. Jones, more so in math than in literacy, because there's just been more literacy out there. There's been more research. There's been more discussion around how to teach literacy and best practices. And so lots of math resources and math things exist out there that just don't have that. When we know our teachers are just starting with high quality instructional materials, we can guarantee those three things exist in those materials. So it's the perfect starting place. Now, teachers make that come alive. Teachers know their kids. Teachers make adjustments to these materials. Teachers make the magic happen in the classroom to engage students and make sure that math is actually being learned and not just being taught, right? Those are two different things. And so that's why the other things are really focused on this expanded coaching model of our instructional leaders and expanded coaching model of our teachers, so that we can really be in the classrooms and be in implementation with them and support that actual delivery. Kind of an example, I would say, using instructional materials, and I'll pull these from recent walks in classroom. We all know if you write the number 5 and you added the number 3 to it, it equals 8. And we're probably all picturing that algorithm in our mind right now. The written number 5, the written number 3, the equals plus sign, the equal sign, the addition sign, the equal sign, and then the number 8. For a kindergartner, the conceptual piece of that is to know that when you have 5 units or 5 unifix cubes, I'm talking about manipulatives here, and then you have 3 and you pull them together, when you count them all together, that's 8. That's just the simple conceptual understanding behind that. And so pairing that with the actual teaching of the numbers is really important as early as our kids start coming to us. What we would see in a 5th grade classroom, when you are multiplying decimals, this is an example I'm pulling from a 5th grade classroom from earlier this week, actually. You're multiplying decimals, actually have 100 cubes in front of them because they're multiplying 2/10 by 3/10, and you can see the tiny piece of the cube actually equals 6/100. And how that represents the 6/100 that's how you come up with that answer. That's what it actually looks like within 100. And so they begin to see that that is just 6 small pieces out of 100. And so that's the conceptual understanding of what it looks like for when you start getting into multiplying fractions, which is a very difficult thing to teach in 5th grade. Or multiplying decimals, I mean, once you get into decimals, it gets pretty tough. Today I was in Dobie, and saw incredible lessons happening at Dobie. It was a wonderful opportunity to walk through some classrooms. In an 8th grade classroom, the students were just doing the math. They had been in instruction, they were in groups, they were working through math problems together. Because they were using STEMscopes materials, they worked through a conceptual problem first. It didn't have numbers, it just had representations of numbers, and they had to solve the problem that way. They had a few more problems that were actually real world scenarios, so they had to solve the problems that way as well and apply it to real world. And so when we have that kind of vertical alignment using high quality instructional materials, we can start to ensure that our students are actually really learning math, and they have this unleashed potential for math and to be mathematicians that many of us didn't get to experience, because so many of us feel like we're stronger in reading than we are in math. And this is changing that experience for them. So I just wanted to say that as far as instructional materials, it just sounds like we're handing books to people, or we're saying, here, follow these steps or do these things, but it's much more in depth than that. There's a real purpose behind high quality instructional materials and why we have adopted the materials in the district that we have, and why it's important that we're spending so much time on that. Okay, so getting to the data itself for 3rd grade numeracy, our goal is 3rd grade STAR math assessment. It definitely aligns with our early learning initiative because we've spent so much time on K2. Obviously, all this past year was on K2. These are third grade results from last year. We did not focus on third through fifth grade at the elementary level. That was intentional. So that we could build that strong foundation. But we already did begin to see, because school systems work together, we already did begin to see some improvement in those math scores. So previously, as you can see on the left-hand side, that has been the variable results that we have seen in math over the past several years. This is the percentage of students that are scoring at meets grade level or above. And we've seen that too as we've talked about our goal progress measures. Superintendent Segura mentioned a correlation between them. When you're looking at the goal progress measure and we're talking about second grade MAP achievement percentiles, we see the same thing. There are years where it goes up, there are years where it goes down. There are some populations where it works better than others, and then some populations where we're seeing some decreases and increases. So it's a lot of variability. So we see that also with our STAR assessment as well. But we have overall seen that correlation this year, that as we've seen a decrease in the number of students, a percentage of students who are qualifying for interventions based on our math screener, we have seen an increase here in the percentage of students who are scoring at meets grade level or above. So again, here we've started to see that correlation, and so it gives us a little more confidence that we are using a goal progress measure that is correlated to the actual goal itself. Of course, what we want in future years, when you look at that yearly target, is not the up and down anymore, but we just want steady improvement in percentage over time. We were at 39% of students last year. Our goal was 40% this year. We actually exceeded that goal by 2% and scored 42% at meets grade level and above. It was actually a little more than we expected. We thought we would see a little slower improvement with math since we did focus on literacy, but I think just some of the overall strategies that we've done just to provide campuses with and what we have been able to do in the math area have shown some early results. And then I'll hand it over to our elementary STEM director, Ms. Jennifer Jones, to talk about a little more analysis of the data and some root causes.
Thank you so much. I usually don't get to talk about this part, so it's actually really exciting. Usually Dr. Maxwell is all of our numbers. So if you are able to see the data table that's up here, I'm sure it's in front of you because I know it looks really small otherwise. This is actually showing historical meets grade level or above on third grade math STAR, and then that orange column in the middle is going to be our current, so that's what we were at for this year. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see the yearly targets that we've set as our goal across our scorecard and what we're hoping to see across all of our student groups that are represented down below that. So some of the big kind of takeaways, just high-level takeaways. So Dr. Maxwell already mentioned it, but we did actually exceed the goal for the 24-25 school year. Not by a ton, but at least by more than we even thought we were going to get to, which is actually really great to see. We all know that we haven't poured as much into math across our district like we would want to be doing this year. We have already started doing and then hope to continue that path forward. But there are practices that are a part of both literacy and math and any good instruction, whether that be science, social studies, any content area, that are transferable. And so it really already has started to have a small impact, and we hope that that will continue to grow over time. Some of the trends that are here that you see, so if you look at all students, which is that top row, you'll see that we had 42% of students scoring at the meets grade level or above, which is great. And if you look below that, you'll see that actually across our student groups, we had growth, and the only place that we fell short of meeting our actual goal was on our white student group. They fell short of our goal that we had set for them by 1%, but they did stay consistent with the previous year, so we didn't decline in our amount of meets for our white student group, which is another thing to take note of. So when you look at the orange column, if you look at the left-hand side of that column, you can make a comparison between last year, 2 years ago and last year, And then if you go to the right, then you can actually see how far above the goals we set are. So just two different ways of looking at that data. One of the things to point out of that is if you're comparing back to the 23-24 school year, we do have our groups all grew by at least 3% or more, again, except for our white student group. So there's also consistent growth happening, but it wasn't like, you know, some populations saw extreme growth and then we had a major gap from others. So that is interesting to see because sometimes that's not always what we see. So we really are seeing improvement across all of our student groups. We just have a lot further to go to close gaps for many of our student groups. Another thing to keep in mind is that the greatest gains that we saw were with our Asian population. We had an increase of 5%. And then in our African American and Hispanic populations, each were 4%, and our special education students was 4%. And that was actually higher than the other groups, which saw 3%, again, except for our white student group. It's nice when we see our marginalized groups have more growth than our other students, but again, not to be fooled because we also have a lot further to go to close the gaps for those students. Basically, all of this to say that math is still a major need in our district. It is right here on paper, right? Another thing for you to know is there's a gap between our literacy performance for third graders, which we'll hear about next month, and our math. And so we have a duty to our students to not only close that gap between subject areas, but also to actually make sure that we're pouring into our student groups and start to really disproportionately, in a good way, impact that growth so that we can start to close the achievement gaps for our students. Last thing that I'll say about the data here is that when we really look across the student populations, knowing that if we compare back to like that 2021 and we kind of follow, there's some inconsistencies in the data, right? We all know the pandemic happened. We know that certain year students didn't take STAR, so you only have certain students represented in that data. And then you also had a change of the assessment and the types of items. So you've really only had a couple of years of comparable data when you take all of that into account. But one thing to note is that there's definitely a clear area with our students of the gap being there between like our white students, which would be a large group of our students, and our Hispanic and African American students. And you've probably seen us talk about this. We talk about it in literacy, we talk about it in math, we talk about the goals, we talk about the GPMs, and we see similar data that we have major gaps for some of our most marginalized students. So in comparison of those with our Asian, our white, and our two or more race groups actually having over 60% scoring at MEETS grade level, which is over half of that student population. Again, MEETS means at grade level according to the state, right? They're at grade level or above. You know, our African American students, for example, we only have 17% of our African American students that are scoring at grade level or above, if that's how we think about MEETS. And that's not okay. So it's our duty, again, with things that we're trying to do, that we have to show that we're closing the gaps for our students. We owe it to them, and they deserve to have a future where they can apply mathematics, they can see themselves as mathematicians, they can go into STEM fields, anything is, you know, possible there, so that is our duty to do. The next part of that, and I kind of talked about a couple of these out of order, but the root cause analysis of this data and what we're seeing, we do see slow improvement, like we said, based on some strategies that we've put into place, but we really haven't poured as heavily into math until this school year. So it'll be interesting to see if we see a bigger jump this school year, knowing that there's been a lot of focus poured into our instructional leaders with math professional learning. We're getting in a lot more math classrooms and really seeing what's happening, and also partnering really closely with our highest need schools to try to pour into them and their teachers and their leaders to really try to see what we can do to impact what's happening in math there. And so the shifts have been positive, but we can't necessarily say that everything that we've done has determined that shift, right? Because we haven't put as many resources into math in the past. The other thing to keep in mind is that those gaps are there. You know, I would talk about this all day long if I could. So we really have to focus resources and support. And that example I gave of us really trying to partner with our top campuses and our school improvement campuses to do things a little bit differently and offer more support and show that we're doing that is really intentional, so that we can show that at the district level we have a duty to serve all of our campuses, but also to show that we're really trying to impact where our most marginalized students are sitting in the classrooms and are part of that instruction. I'm just going to remind everybody that mathematics performance is actually a predictor of future success, actually more so than literacy. So I'm just going to remind us that when we talk about this goal and also the GPM that's associated with it, when we look at that data, this is why this is so meaningful. Because every single child that is sitting in our buildings, that is potentially on their way to our buildings, that haven't even been born yet, deserves the right to be able to have a future where those possibilities are endless. They can go into any field they want. They can be confident. They can, know how to manage their money. They can know how to look at different documents and have a function and know that somewhere back in there, actually math helped them to be able to approach those problems. So that is our charge, and that is what we hope to do. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Pace.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. I have the pleasure tonight to highlight some of our Band 1 and 2 campuses that performed above the district average and/or showed significant growth. Bless you.
Thank you.
The success isn't accidental. The campuses have put structures in place to address the challenges, and this includes consistent use of district-adopted materials, making data-driven decisions for instruction and intervention, and PLCs focused on instruction and outcomes. So I'd first like to talk about Galindo Elementary. It's a Band 1 campus, and they made remarkable gains in math from 30% at meets or above in 2024 to 59% at meets or above in 2025, well above the district average of 42%. Galindo serves a diverse student population, 86% Hispanic, 6% white. 90% of their students are economically disadvantaged, and nearly 40% of their students are receiving special education services. And Galindo really improved math instruction through a monthly vertical team meeting and focused on improving the math block at all grade levels. They also worked hard on weekly PLCs with a focus on student engagement in Tier 1 instruction. And the key drivers to success for them, again, were fidelity to high-quality instructional materials and tight collaboration between general education teachers and special education teachers. Blackshear Elementary, a Band 2 campus, also serves a diverse population, 22% African American, 10% 2 or more races, 40% Hispanic, 26% white, and 52% of their students are economically disadvantaged. 22% are receiving special education services. Their third grade math scores rose from 24% at meets or above to 49 in 2024, and to 49% at meets or above in 2025, again exceeding the district average of 42%. And as Dr. Maxwell mentioned earlier this evening, teachers have the greatest impact. This improvement was due in large part to a dedicated third grade math teacher who was really only in her second year of teaching math, but she really built positive relationships and created a safe space and an environment where students can make mistakes and learn from them. It's just really fun to be in that classroom. Blackshear maintains an intentional focus on STEM scopes, implementation for core instruction, and also on Imagine Learning for their online individualized learning work. And they work in a small group station rotation format and even create competitions just to increase student engagement. Campbell Elementary, a Band 2 campus, has shown steady and consistent growth. In fact, in 2023, 24% of their students were at meets or above. That increased to 33% in 2024 and to 45% in 2025, above our district average. And Campbell also serves a diverse student population, 41% African American, 6% 2 or more races, 27% Hispanic, 19% white, and 74% of their students are economically disadvantaged, and 22% are receiving special education services. And their success stems from instructional consistency and staffing consistency. They've been able to maintain their teachers and have consistent grade level teams across multiple years, and provide strong coaching cycles that ensure lesson internalization and alignment of high quality instructional materials. They also have daily intervention and enrichment blocks that are focused really to address both struggling students and advanced learners, intentionally pushing all students forward. And while we did not include these in the report, I just can't help but take a point of pride. I won't list too many campuses. I know I did too many last time, but I have to name these. Palm Elementary is Band 2 campus. They had 31% of their students at meets or above in 2024 and 49% at meets or above in 2025. Zavala Elementary, also a Band 2 campus, had 20% of their students at meets or above in 2024. That increased to 44% at meets or above in 2025. Both campuses focused on consistent use of the district curriculum, just increasing observation and feedback cycles, and improving lesson preparation and data analysis in PLCs. So this is the type of growth and excellence that we want to replicate across Austin ISD. We want to learn from our positive outlier campuses and seek to extend their practices. When we build strong instructional systems and support our teachers and believe in every child's potential, then outcomes change. And just want to pause and see if there's any additional thoughts from my team up here before we move on to next steps.
So proud because I know we've seen those campuses. So to see those leaders and the growth that they've really made at their campus with real intentionality is exciting.
I think so. I had an opportunity to visit Blackshear earlier this week as well, and just the conversations that they were having after our classroom walkthroughs and the things that they're doing, and the focus on their own level of professional development for their teachers that they're providing, and some systems they're putting in place for that has really been great. They got some great Lighthouse stuff last year as well, and they've really taken that to heart and had a very good understanding of what was happening in their classrooms and some really wonderful responses. And I know Campbell too, it really is the model for just student engagement and, a culture walking in, and small group instruction, very, very intentional small group instruction, so that they know where every student is and they have a very intentional plan to support them where they need it.
That's great. And I would be remiss to not brag a little bit on a campus that I visited this morning. It was Wooten Elementary. They're in a swing space, so it's kind of a portable city out there, but visited a 4th grade math class. I wished you were with us because, an E-Star intervention group was happening. Students were working collaboratively on STEM Scopes activities and games. There was just a teacher was really working hard to assess students. When one student would finish, she was like, okay, start the next. It just worked like a well-oiled machine, so it's exciting. All right, we can move on to the next steps. What are we gonna do now? And really kind of revolves around 5 items, just clear expectations, professional learning, investing in campus leadership, leadership coaching, and prioritizing high-needs campuses. So we must provide clear expectations for all campuses, and this includes ensuring clarity around our instructional components and the resources used for each of those components, and ensuring that every classroom provides rigorous, grade level math instruction using our district adopted materials, and not just using them haphazardly, but using them as intended and using them in rigorous ways. And we must provide scaffolds and supports so all students can access grade level content, which could look like small group station rotation and access to those hands-on materials to make some of the abstract concepts more concrete. Additionally, we must provide meaningful, focused professional learning for teachers and instructional leaders. One way we'll do this is through consistent observation and feedback cycles for teachers, adjusting the frequency to support teacher need. Teachers will also strengthen content knowledge and pedagogy through planning PLCs focused on really internalizing the curriculum, kind of moving into that, using the curriculum as intended and in rigorous ways. We'll provide support for data use in PLCs to identify needed instructional adjustments and to support teachers in making intervention decisions. We must invest in campus leadership, so we'll expand our Lighthouse Schools model to strengthen instructional leadership, and this would include expanding our instructional focus to math in addition to literacy, and increasing Lighthouse campuses to have 6 Lighthouse campuses that are receiving intensive coaching support for teachers as well as campus leadership. And then each of those lighthouses will host a cohort of 6 to 7 campuses, ultimately supporting 37 campus leadership teams that come together monthly for professional learning and hands-on application and practice. This work is designed to build leadership capacity in consistent coaching, observation and feedback cycles, and observing and coaching alongside curriculum, as well as effective PLCs and leadership team calibration. We also must strengthen leadership coaching supports. We will continue our monthly professional learning for campus leadership teams, as well as executive directors, to strengthen content knowledge and content-based coaching. Executive directors and campus leadership teams will then apply those skills by conducting instructional rounds together to align expectations and to improve coaching for our campus leaders and teachers. And finally, we must prioritize high-needs campuses. We are continuing to target resources to our priority support and resource index campuses to support instruction, intervention, and coaching, such as by providing an instructional coach, providing a content interventionist, and maintaining smaller class sizes. Additionally, we'll conduct root cause analysis for student groups and campuses not making progress. And one way we're doing that is through the placement of our Lighthouse schools at campuses with larger percentages of students with larger percentages of African American students and historically marginalized students. And additionally, we're collecting observational data around student engagement and participation and teacher feedback and interaction. And finally, we're differentiating the way professional learning is provided at our high-needs campuses. And I'll pause here and let Dr. Maxwell talk a little bit about some of the differentiation of our professional learning.
Right, so the way that we provide levels of professional learning to all the campuses, but we definitely tier how we deliver that professional learning and then the frequency of it as well. So part of it, even just walks and coaching and everything, that definitely is prioritized on our school improvement campuses and these 37 that are going through Lighthouse and Learning Lab process. It's definitely a part of our improvement plans for all of these campuses as well. Additionally, so Job Alike at the beginning of the year was a good example of this, knowing that we can't get to 79 campuses in one day. What we did was grouped campuses together. We started with our school improvement campuses on the first couple of days, so that when we grouped them together, we did group them, but they were smaller groups rather than trying to fit huge numbers. all together. It wasn't per campus, but we had a few campuses together. And we were able to deliver sort of rolling sessions, a couple of rolling days of in-person professional learning for them. We did provide the same professional learning to all campuses, but if you weren't a school improvement campus, then it happened in a virtual session, so that those were larger sessions, so that more teachers could attend, but they didn't get in person. So same information for all campuses, but more personalized support for school improvement campuses. So that's according to our support and resource index, of course, and the Band 1 and Band 2 campuses. Another thing that we also do is offer more frequent coaching visits, frequent campus support visits to Band 1 and Band 2 campuses. And then throughout the rest of this year, we're designing some sessions where, again, we'll provide information and learning for the entire district, but in-person sessions that are more targeted to the campus needs that we've seen as we visit campuses. Will be in-person delivery, or not necessarily just pulling everyone together in a room, but that may happen at some after-school sessions. That could happen in PLCs during the day. We're working with campus leaders right now to get some ideas on the best way to implement that. There's never one best way to do it, because, you know, teachers' time is precious and valuable, and you know, the best way to use that time across campuses always looks a little bit different. And so we're just sort of differentiating our support with that. Additionally, we have just recently talked about, and we're starting to plan for, we are working with our partner right now for Lighthouse Schools and Learning Labs. And so Lighthouse Schools get an increased level of very targeted coaching and support with everything that we're doing. And they get it very regularly. Learning Lab campuses visit Lighthouse Schools, and so they do that work regularly with them, but they're visiting the other school while they do it. They learn some things, and they go back to their campus. What our academics team are partnering with school leadership, and what our academics team has talked about starting to do, so that we can replicate that work and sustain it within district for long term, because that's always the goal, right? What are we doing in district? How can we sustain the work long term with just us? Is replicating that coaching for our other 31 campuses that are not Lighthouse Schools. So them getting the benefit of academics team, you know, someone like Ms. Jones walking through a math class with them and saying, what are you seeing? What do we want to see? Is the math aligned to the rigor and the instruction that we're looking for? You know, how can we support this teacher? What are the amazing things we did see that we can give glows on? All of that. And that really is the professional learning for the campus leader. Teachers benefit from that, but the ultimate goal there, of course, that teachers benefit and students benefit, but that's actually through the instructional leader, so that when we're not there, and as a regular practice on their parts, they feel more and more and more confident every time they walk into a classroom and they're observing math instruction, or they walk into a classroom and they're observing any kind of instruction. Really, it's a process that we're replicating, that we'll be providing to campuses with highest needs.
Yeah. I think that wrapped up our next steps, but open to questions.
Okay, questions? My questions are in the truck, in the thing.
The attachment, yeah.
Yeah, they're there. You answered them. Thank you.
Do we have additional questions? Trustee Kaufman?
No, I have no further questions. Very thorough and addressed all the issues. I will note, just as I walked away, I was always listening in the other room, so I heard the entire thing. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a long session before this, so everyone probably needed a break.
Yeah. Questions?
I just have one kind of concept, I guess, broadly based question, but considering the conversation that we had earlier, you know, on your next steps, you know, the last few bullet points, ongoing investment in campus leaders and instructional leaders, ongoing investment in district school leadership and instructional leaders, providing increased support, you know, for all these pieces, you know, considering the conversation that we had about central office and the cuts that we've had before and the increased lifts, and this is obviously one of the increased lifts, And so I'm just wondering what we're anticipating, since those cuts, some of them were over the summer, and we're just now getting into this piece, how that's changing the work that we're doing on, this one specifically, but, I think this kind of speaks to the changes across all the endeavors that we're undertaking. So I don't know if you can speak to that, as far as what we can consider for the future and what the trustees can be thinking about it as we're navigating other things that will also affect, these type of lifts that we're engaged in.
So I think the investments that we've made so far have been really significant on the district's part and all of our parts. And I think that as a district, we have done a very intentional job of protecting teaching and learning, and making sure that we are still continuing to make those investments, that we do still have support and have intentionally built teams across academics and school leadership that can do this work together. Any reduction in any of this work, I definitely would have an impact on student outcomes, ultimately, which is always, there are lots of adults involved with that, but ultimately, student outcomes over time would suffer. And I think the variability that's happened in the system previous to the last couple of years have shown that in student outcomes. We've seen ups, we've seen downs, we've seen hirings, we've seen lots of firings, and kind of big reductions in staff previous to, I think, some much more intentional, thoughtful reductions. Any reduction would definitely affect the ability to support campuses. With consolidations and kind of the moves we've been making in the background to make sure every campus is equipped for this work with the materials that they have, with the support that we give them, with the support that they're having themselves as they're learning to do some things differently together. That's kind of the background of the steadiness that we've been trying to create, so that when a student moves from one campus to another, it is not a vastly different experience. As a matter of fact, it should be a very similar experience, and that speaks from campus to campus, but it also speaks vertically. When you leave 4th grade and go into 5th grade, you should have a similar experience. When you leave 5th grade and go into 6th grade, you should have a similar experience, because that matters to kids and to families, and it matters to their success. Some of the work to, I think, strengthen the academic programming here, yes, is so that we can continue to make those investments. And we always will still continue to look for ways where we can get things done in-house. Not that we don't benefit from great learning from partners and from people that we have partnered with, but the ultimate intention is to be able to do that ourselves. As you are bringing campuses together, thinking through all of the programs and things that we've built, and bringing them together, I think that consistency across the campuses makes a big difference for that.
Well, I was just going to say, to be really clear, like one really good example that Dr. Maxwell, I think maybe could offer is, we took in professional development in 2024. It was something that we used lots of partners to do, to execute, and it was costly. And so under Dr. Maxwell's leadership, we've been able to kind of restructure ourselves. It did include, kind of moving folks around, kind of reassigning roles and responsibilities, and in some cases an investment in staff. But now we have that hyper responsiveness, right? There was an example where a couple of weeks ago we identified a misalignment in the system, and Dr. Maxwell and her team were very, very quickly able to bring the group that needed the support together, provide that support within a week and a half notice. That type of responsiveness did not exist, and so that there's an expense to that, but we have kind of transferred it from an external expense that was higher to an internal expense, but it's still an expense. And if you compare that kind of department versus where it was 4 years ago, you would see, okay, well, it increased, but there's a reason that it did. I just want to kind of reinforce that these sorts of things have been very intentional. And as we move forward, if we do see reductions by way of consolidations or otherwise, we have to kind of recognize that there's going to be an impact in the opposite direction too, in some cases, like performance-wise.
So then I think my last part of that, still kind of within that same question, is that, within the larger strategy that we're applying for improving these outcomes, I guess my understanding of like how we're using Lighthouse schools and kind of expanding this, how much of this are we expecting that the lift, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, that we're pulling up as opposed to pushing, like how much does this ability trickle down, into the campuses for those professional learning communities? Like, I think that's my understanding of how this approach starts to spread. But if we could clarify that just a little bit, I would appreciate that. How this spreads
Yeah, I think
out
Dr.
amongst-
Maxwell, the way to kind of respond to that is just the fact that Lighthouse model it's not in perpetuity, right? It's meant to kind of educate our system and how to serve our students and staff. And so we're using it, we're building on it. It's not every school initially. We've expanded it now to be responsive to the work that is coming, but it's not a partner that we're relying on. We're relying on them to help us become better so that we can self-perform that type of support between our schools. So that's one example that I would say. I don't know if Dr. Maxwell, you want to add anything to that?
No, that's a perfect example. That's what, as we go out, so we do a lot of this work with them so that we are learning as well how to become better leaders of this work. And so as we learn that, then the expectation on our teams is we turn around and our teams think, okay, what do we do now? How do we replicate this in our own system so that, ultimately it is just us performing that work? I think it's always good and healthy to, have some outside opinions, and that's why we do audits and things like that. So you always learn from those things, like we're learning from this partnership as well. But ultimately the goal, just like an audit, is that we learn from the things and then we in-house can replicate that work and make it sustainable within the district.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm trying to, crystallize that as much as we're talking about all these other pieces, like how much are we internalizing and integrating, as part of that path forward? Because I think we're talking so much about the issues that we're trying to address. And I am trying to start framing things more about how that connects to that path forward. So I appreciate the clarification on how we're integrating this into where we're headed.
Thank you. Trustee Quintana, anything?
No, my questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. Within the bands, there's real variability on the percentage of students who are hitting this level. What do you know about the differences within each band and why we're seeing such variability?
Yeah, I can start that, and then these two I'm sure, happy to join in. I think when you look at the bands of schools, even though they're all in one band together, they all, as they should, have a different level of operations within it. Right? They have different communities, they have different resources, not the ones we provide, but the ones that they have grown in-house and that they support and that their community supports. So I think execution always looks just a little bit different on all of these campuses, even though they're in the same band. So it's hard to narrow that down. One or two things that would, I think, describe that answer. I will say in general, when we're looking at improvement over time, which is actually one of the things that we looked at this time, historically, where were the students and where was that campus, and took some examples of ones that aren't just, scoring above the district average now, but where were they last year? Where were they 2 years ago? The ones that we're seeing trends and improvement, even if the numbers aren't quite where we all want them to be, are the ones that are putting these systems into place on campuses. You mentioned PLCs. That's where that lives ultimately in a campus with their own teachers and with their own leaders. and what's happening in the context of that campus. And so like that's a system that many times we have said, and the campuses have told us as we reach out to them and as we see those practices in place, those systems are getting stronger and stronger and stronger, so that everything that they have at their fingertips now, they're finding the better and better ways to execute them. Ultimately, I think there's a large amount of control that we have as a district over student outcomes. There are some things we don't have control over for student outcomes. And so we do, I think, the best job we can focusing on those things that are within our control, and making sure that they are absolutely the highest quality that we can get them. And I do know that there will always be, though, some variability with campuses and with outcomes and student populations that are not always within our control. I don't know if y'all want to add anything.
Yes, and I would just go back to there's variances in size, and just I talked about Campbell, for example, or Blackshear rather. There are 2 teachers on 3rd grade team, and they're departmentalized. So literally it's 1 teacher having that significant impact. And then just teacher certification and vacancies, I've been watching and tracking and just looking at impact, and there's so many factors. Testing language, if they've changed testing language for the first time. And JJ, you could probably add.
I think even too, just reminding everybody that with the curriculum itself, while, our outliers note the use of that, last year was like their big push to really use the curriculum and get comfortable and start leaning into STEM scopes, which is the district approved. And so this year, we probably could put like a rough number on how much we see it in the classrooms that we're visiting, and it's pretty much every classroom. There's a few that aren't, but for the most part, it's, upward of over 90% of the classrooms that we're seeing, and so that's huge. So now that we know campuses who did that early push into it and used it with fidelity saw some growth, we hope that others who this would be kind of their big year 1 of true implementation of it would maybe see some of those same increases in gains.
Thank you. And then I just have one other question, which is, can you just share a little bit more about the Lighthouse model and how it works with math? I've had the chance to visit one for literacy, but I would just love for our community to know, and I would love to know a little bit more about kind of what it looks like to be that school and what it looks like to be supported, to have the opportunity to learn from that school.
So the actual 6 Lighthouse schools get teacher coaching on a 2-week cycle. They'll come in and coach, observe, and provide feedback, and then they give them a week to implement. And then the leadership team additionally gets coaching and feedback. Additionally, they are bringing in 6 to 7 campuses once a month to those 6 Lighthouse schools and working on a variety of things, including
Lighthouse classrooms also with you last year, and some of the things that we saw. There's a real difference when teachers and leaders receive that personalized coaching based on what they're doing right there in the moment, versus some of the more general professional learning sessions that we give that is good information for all teachers, but going back and executing that, implementing it in the classroom, there could be disconnects in between there. When that coaching happens right there on the campus with the teacher, with the instructional leader, it's just very personalized feedback for what you're doing in that moment, and then you instantly can learn and grow from that. That's that piece that we're replicating as an academics team on campuses that aren't Lighthouse campuses, so that we are right there in that moment saying, okay, what are you seeing? It's hard to describe, I think, the load on campus leaders sometimes, because being able to know and be responsible for what every classroom is doing at any given moment in your campus is a wonderful weight, and it is also a weight. Like it's a large responsibility. And so the amount that you have to learn and be good at is pretty incredible. And so having someone with you that is a partner that coaches you in that moment is incredibly helpful rather than trying to get all of that done on your own. I think Trustee Foster mentioned reading reports and it laid into the hours. That's what, many of our leaders are doing right now, reading into standards and documents and, understanding where teachers are in their teaching so that they can give them really good feedback, which is the number one thing that, moves that work. We know teachers have the highest impact on student outcomes, and principals have the second highest impact. And so that investment in them as kind of lighthouse campuses and then sort of proxy lighthouse campuses, as we begin to replicate that work, we think will have a great impact.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Hunter.
I asked all my questions, but now I have a curiosity, and I just want to know about HLPs. So we talked about centralizing curriculum, and we talked about spreading those practices. When you're saying high leverage action steps, are these, because you got teaching works, you got to get better faster. What is the district? Because I would really love to know, like, the district has said, these are the 7, 8, 12 high leverage practices that we know will move outcomes. I think I would like to know that.
I love that question. That is actually some of the work that we started last year and that we're continuing to do this year to build what would be part of that overall picture of the academic framework and instructional model. Lots of times, and I know our PPFT system works this way as well, you'll get evaluation systems and sort of walkthrough forms and some instructional models that are just content agnostic, and they'll go, just be general instructional strategies. We see that a lot happening actually when we go through classrooms and we're debriefing outside. People are very comfortable with instructional strategies and not nearly as comfortable with a very content-specific what's happening in the classroom and how to give teachers feedback on that. That is exactly what we're working towards right now, so that they are content-specific. We only have a few that are content-specific right now. We're excited about building some more, actually. Science and social studies in particular are on our minds, so that it does increase that level of the feedback and the instructional strategy that should be used within that content at that time. There will always be some content agnostic things, and there should be, so that will be part of it as well, but we're actually building that right now.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? All right. So now we must vote on whether we will accept the monitoring report. We are voting to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we had a satisfactory conversation with the superintendent and have a deeper understanding about how the current reality for students lines up with the vision. And at this point, I will entertain a motion for the acceptance of the monitoring report.
I move to accept the monitoring report.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, having a motion by Trustee Quintana and a second by Trustee Hunter to approve the monitoring report, please raise your hand if you vote to approve. All in favor? Okay, and none opposed. Motion passes by all on the dais. And thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And JJ, it's really fun to see how excited you get about math teaching. Thank you. Thank you all. All right, so this ends our section on the information reports from the administration, and now we will move into a preview of agenda items that will be considered for a vote at the next regular board meeting on October 30th, and staff are available to answer questions on tonight's preview. We're going to start with agenda item number 8, preview for upcoming academics and curricular items. Any questions about this? All right. Oh, yep. Okay, Trustee Kaufman's getting organized. I can use this moment to get organized. I have a lot of paper with me tonight. We're on 8, agenda preview number 8. Yes, good on 8, all right. Agenda 9 is business and finance. Anything on this? I have one on the budget amendment, and thank you for the narrative. I always appreciate that. I see $250,000 for school improvement, I see $175,000 for redistributed to correct funding for TEA special education. And then 1.5 million for the university instructor content. Would just love a quick rundown about what that is. And I don't need much, just, yeah, thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'll start with the 1.5 on university instructors. This is our teacher pipeline. So these are our teacher resident programs. So this is wraparound supports for them. They have built-in instructional coaching, et cetera. So.
Thank you. Yay. Okay. And the school improvement and TEA compliance? It's those two that I'm curious about, the 175 for TEA compliance for special education and $100,000 for, and the 250 for that school improvement work.
Hello. Sorry, hello.
Okay.
Okay, for the 21, the 175, I do believe that is for the monitors. And what was the other one, President Boswell?
The other one was the $250,000 for the school improvement. Okay, you can just let us know in writing.
Okay.
So the $175,000 is for the ongoing cost of the monitors?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do have two.
Trustee Kaufman has a question.
Yeah, so I just want to commend the administration again on making sure that the budget is real and that you make these budget adjustments to reflect what the real spending is. I know that's a commitment that you made earlier, so I appreciate that. I have a question on 9.3 on the extension of the parent support program. I just want to ensure that I'm understanding correctly that this is renewing, it's extending and renewing a commitment from the city of Austin to provide funding to support our parent engagement program. Is that correct? We're accepting
Good
money
evening.
through this.
Yes, that is correct. It is an extension, so each time that we've been granted funds from the city, they're on, I think, a 5-year cycle. So it's just renewing that cycle.
And this is money coming from the city?
It's money coming from the city, correct?
Yeah, so I know that's something people bring up a lot is, can the city of Austin contribute to the work that we're doing? And this is one, $1 million plus way that they are contributing, and I appreciate that.
5.4.
Over the course of
Yeah.
the 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And they also have a budget deficit. Just, I very much appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10, facilities. Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to number 11, talent strategy.
Yes.
Trustee Kaufman.
On 11.1, on the approval of the HB 3372 administrative personal services contracts, when will we see those administrative personal services contracts? When will those be provided to us?
We will have it ready for the board preview ahead of the voting meeting.
Okay, so they'll be in the board preview for the next voting meeting, okay.
And we wanted to give folks as much time as possible to submit their applications.
Okay, and just to be clear, the agenda item says that the contracts were submitted to the senior leaders and that they have verified. Will the contracts themselves be provided
Yes, sir.
in the board?
It'll be in the
Okay.
executive content.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, next is number 12, policy. Any questions about this? Trustee Kaufman.
On 12.2, which is the determination requiring a period of prayer and reading of the Bible, there are several whereases talking about how students and faculty and everyone is free to, there's no restrictions on people praying in school now, but there's no kind of whereas stating that students and faculty have no restrictions on reading the Bible in school right now, right? So the resolution covers prayer and Bible, but all the kind of whereases reiterate the right that students already have to prayer. I'm curious whether it would be important to include in there clarification that students have the right to bring a Bible and read it during school if they want to.
Yes, thank you for the question, Trustee Kaufman, and good evening. I think what we tried to capture here is that though the board was not electing to create a policy consistent with the recent state law, is to recognize that there still is rights for students under Texas law and under the U.S. Constitution under the Free Exercise Clause. And so I think you're correct. We wanted to spell out prayer, but we didn't recognize a Bible. But under free exercise, if a student did choose to read the Bible during their personal time, during non-instructional time, consistent with what they are legally permitted to do as a right that they have, they can certainly do that. So though it may not be reflected here, that right still exists.
Okay, and it's not important to put it in there?
I don't think it will have any bearing on a student's right whether or not to do it, but we can amend the resolution to add that language if that was the desire of the board.
I'm only asking because I think that what the law requires us to do is to either say we are or are not going to have a policy explicitly stating that. I don't think the law says that we have to put all these kind of whereases explaining why. So I feel like the reason we're putting all these whereases is to reassure our families who might say, this is a godless district that won't allow us to pray or have a Bible, that no, we allow students per law to read the Bible or to pray. So I just think if we're trying to make it clear to families that we're not restricting those, it would seem that we would want to just clarify that as well. But I'm not a lawyer.
That's an adjustment that we can make. We can add the language.
Okay, I'm happy to. Yes. I'm happy to talk offline if you want to explain why that's not necessary, but I just wanted to clarify. And then I guess more importantly, just publicly make sure people understand that what we're doing here. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And I would add, Mr. Walker, can you clarify, this isn't something we just decided we needed on our agenda. This is a legal requirement.
Yes, the resolution itself is a legal requirement, but I think as we've indicated here with the whereas clauses, we wanted to make it clear that's not language that we had to incorporate, but the goal was to make it clear that there still is a right under the free exercise clause exists. Again, that's a right under the First Amendment of the Constitution. So we tried to indicate language there to indicate what the right is, despite what we've indicated at the upper portion of this resolution regarding the legal requirement on whether the board was going to adopt a policy.
Thank you. I really appreciate the clarity in making the law clear to our families too, and that right clear. I appreciate that. And I also just want to thank everyone involved in gathering the new District Innovation Committee and doing that work. Thank you. Next up is agenda preview other. That would be our Lone Star Governance quarterly and yearly evaluation. Any comments? All right. Next up is number 14, Travis Central Appraisal District Board of Directors nominations. We good on that one? All right. And then we will have a transfer appeal at the end. All right. Oh, no, we need to vote. I'm sorry. The item for action is the TCAD nominations. Yes. So we will be voting on a resolution now to nominate 2 candidates to serve in the Travis Central Appraisal District Board of Directors for 4-year terms starting on January 1st, 2026. The nomination by resolution is due to TCAD by October 14th, 2025. And TCAD will provide a list of all nominees before November. And the board will consider action on allocating votes for nominees at the November 20th regular voting meeting. Do I have a motion to approve item 14.1?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Hunter. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Having a motion by Trustee Hunter to approve agenda item 14.1, Travis Central Appraisal District Board of Directors nominations, and a second from Trustee Quintana. Is there any discussion on this item?
Oh, I do have a question.
Yes.
So, for some reason, I thought I'd already seen the little applications, but that was for something else that we were going through. I've seen so many, I've read this recently. Where we posted for this to go up?
We posted, Josh handled it for us, and we got 30-something applications, so it got out there.
We sent an email to the entire community.
Okay, excellent. That was perfect. Thank you.
And really want to share our appreciation with everyone who applied. We got a lot of applications and really appreciate that people were interested in doing that. Any more discussion? All right, having a motion by trustee Hunter and a second by trustee Quintana to approve item 14.1. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all on the dais. Thank you. And we will now recess the open meeting at 11:34 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. When we finish with the executive session, we will return briefly to open session to take action on the transfer appeal and to formally adjourn the meeting. The vote and adjournment will be recorded and included in all replays of tonight's meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good evening.